rescheduled. Our couple times rescheduled June 1st board meeting that we're having today on June 23rd. Secretary, would you kindly call the roll?
Chairperson Zenner Davis is not here. Oops. Here we go. Vice Chair Goldstein
Present.
and Commissioner Roeder
Here.
All right, super. We're all here. We'll move on to item 3, which is our public comment segment. We allot 15 minutes. And because we're here in the boardroom, if there's anyone who's interested in public comment, I just ask that you kind of queue up at the lectern so that you can be amplified. Is there anyone who's interested in public comment? Please, yeah.
Actually, if we're going to talk about anything about the compensation study today, we can wait until that portion.
So our item 9A is that class and comp study.
Because there's some comments that I really would like you guys to hear, and I don't want to have to rush it, being that there's only a few minutes that can be taken during public comments.
Sure.
Okay.
No. Okay.
So
No problem. Okay.
But just while I'm up here, I do like to make a public comment because I want to have the opportunity to introduce some of the executive board for BCCE that is here, and I would like to acknowledge them. And so we have Yazid Hill, who's our grievance chair for BCCE. Yazid, you can raise your hand.
Great.
And then we have Stephen Hopkins, who is our negotiations chair from the BCC Exec Board. You guys know Frank. So I just wanted, have, and then Sean Jackson, she may be on Zoom. She's our communications chair. And it's unfortunate that this is probably our last meeting until we come back in the fall, but we wanted you to all have the opportunity to acknowledge and meet the BCC Executive Board portion of it. You had the opportunity to meet Mark, and you had the opportunity to meet Jocelyn, but we all want you guys to know that we are 100% for the commission. We just been hearing some things, and we just want you to know that we need our commission. We need our merit system. And there may be some things, of course, that we may not agree with the decisions that are being made, but we stick by our commission.
Thank you.
So we wanted that to be noted on record.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate that. And
Thank you.
very nice to meet the rest of the executive board. I see Jocelyn's on and Mark now. This is so nice. I can finally see who's on the Zoom. Hooray.
Yeah.
Okay. Are on the Zoom. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Mildred. Thank you all for coming in person.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak at public comment? Okay, seeing no movements, no hand raised, et cetera, we'll move on. Agenda item 4 is the approval and adoption of the agenda.
I so move.
Okay, and I second. So we have a quorum and we're okay. Our next item is approval of meeting minutes. We have 3 sets of meeting minutes, so we'll review one at a time. So item 5A are our special meeting minutes from May 3rd. Any discussion?
I did not have any changes to those meeting minutes.
I just have one, which is to ask, I think the numbering after item 4 somehow got off the rails. And if we could just, renumber 5, 6, 7 instead of 9, 10, 11, I think we'll be okay.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay, with that change, I move acceptance of the May 3rd, 2023 meeting minutes.
And I concur. All right, moving on to 5B, which is the May 4th regular meeting minutes. Any discussion?
Same on one of these minutes, but I didn't note it. There was a typographical error, but it didn't change the substance at all. And I'm not sure which minutes it was. So I didn't have any substantive changes.
All right. I think I caught the typo on this one. These are just small things.
Mm-hmm.
I would ask that in the future on minutes like these, it looks like the unofficial version shows up on page 2 and afterwards, but it doesn't show up on the first page. I wasn't sure if we were aware of that, but if we can have it show up on the first page, that would be good.
Okay.
And then there was just something that I am wondering if it was maybe a transcription error. I don't know. And maybe it actually came out this way. For item 6E in the second paragraph, the phrase is organizing other districts. We were talking about Eric Hall and Associates. And as I recall the discussion, they were talking about org dev and organizational structure of other districts. And I think what we really meant was to say how other districts are organized or staffed, and maybe we could just temper that a little bit. I think the typo we saw was in item 7. The word was long range, but we dropped the E. And
Yes, that was the one I
Yeah.
noticed too.
Okay. And then let me see, is there anything else? No, this is a question for me. Yeah, right. These are questions I can ask later. Okay. Oh, one other typo possibly. This was item 9, the second paragraph, and there was a reference to 2020 that I think probably should have been 2022.
It's stated as 2020 in the meeting.
Was it?
But I will double check that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. This is why we take notes. Okay. Those were the only items that I had questions about.
Okay, well, again, with those changes, I move adoption of the meeting minutes for, what is this, May 23rd, is it?
May 4th.
Oh, let's see, wait a second.
So item 5B.
Yes, May 4th.
Okay. And I concur. I agree. I second. So we'll consider those approved with the suggested modifications. And then item 5C, these are the special meeting minutes from May 31st.
Okay.
Any discussion?
No, I didn't have anything to change.
Me neither. So
Okay, move acceptance of the May 31st meeting
s-
minutes.
I second. So great. We have adopted and approved all the meeting minutes. So we are close to caught up. Thank you very much. I know minutes take a long time. Appreciate having all these. Let's move on to item 6, and these are reports. So start with the union.
Good afternoon again. I would like to just bring to your attention again, I know that the last couple of meetings we have discussed the situation with Ms. Margot Wilson. And I was looking through our notes again, and on December 15th, the special meeting agenda that we had, it was stated then that a desk audit was to be done, and I'm thinking it is probably the last, what page is this? Maybe page 3 of the minutes of that meeting where Chairperson Goldstein said that a desk audit should be done, and the Commissioner Roder and Vice Chairperson Zener Davis agreed with the suggestion. And Secretary Castillo reiterated his original suggestion in the 10/6/22 meeting regarding future reclassification requests and reminded the commission that this position will be looked at in the first phase of the classification and compensation study. But Chairperson Goldstein requested a desk audit outside the study since this started before the decision was made to conduct the study. So with that being said, and we have constantly referenced 30.300.4 of the merit rules, we are asking at this time, because we keep talking about the same things over and over again. And when are we going to just do the right thing, respect the merit rules, and just do what's supposed to be done? And so we know that 34.300.4 states when a portion of the position in a class are reclassified upward, those incumbents with 3 or more years service in one or more of the position being reclassified shall be reclassified with their position. And at this time, regardless of the classification study, we are asking that the merit rules be respected and that Ms. Wilson is reclassified with the others that was classified to admin assistant to. And we have it here where it says that a desk audit should be done. We're in June. That was in December. It was never done. So we're asking for her to be reclassified with the rest of her peers. And then I will talk further when we get into item 9 for the classification study. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Item 5B, district report. Is there anyone here from the district? Or anybody on Zoom? I don't see anybody on Zoom from the district, do you? No? Okay, so we'll pass on district report. Commissioner reports.
Okay, so we have a lengthy agenda, so I am going to try to be as brief as I can. A few things. One is I also want to thank the union and thank the officials on the executive board who are here today. I'm really happy to I'm not exactly meeting all of you, but I know some of you, and I'm very, very pleased that you come. And I'm very, very pleased about BCCE's participation in this commission and the workings of this commission. As Mildred Chair pointed out, we don't always agree on 100% of the things, but we do agree on many, many things. And we try to move forward on the things we're able to. And I really appreciate the participation of the union officials. So that's number one. Number two, we're not allowed to go into any great detail about it because it's not on our agenda. But I do want to comment a little bit about the Margot Wilson situation. And I don't know necessarily all of the ins and outs of it. However, 2 points. One is that we probably should put it back on our agenda, I think, at some point, maybe at our next meeting, whenever that is, because it's my impression that I agree with you that performing a desk audit was discussed and requested, not just discussed. I would like to get more clarity. I may have a false impression, but my impression is that there's some confusion about the reclassification process compared to the desk audit process. And I'm not talking about the class and comp study at this point, and that Margot Wilson has, taken some steps in that direction. But I think we do need to have some clarity on what has happened there. Secondly, and I think Ms. Scher is aware of this, and maybe Mr. Hernandez, we do have a disagreement. I mean, I don't interpret the rule in precisely the same way that BCCE has interpreted this particular rule. I think I agree on interpretations of 95% of the rules that BCCE sets forth, but not this one. And I've said at previous meetings that maybe we ought to have on our agenda a full-blown discussion about the interpretation of this rule. I know when the item came forward, I asked a whole lot of questions about the interpretation of this rule. And at least for me, they haven't been, satisfactorily answered at this point. I'm not blaming anybody. I just think that there are different interpretations of this rule. And then lastly, I did want to take a minute to, they're not really here now, but I wanted to thank our executive director, Mr. Castillo. I wanted to thank the superintendent, and I wanted to thank the assistant superintendent for HR for coming up with, as I understand it, a very creative solution for the need for a half-time administrative assistant going forward, that the funding, as I understand it, is not coming out of the general fund. So that's a good thing. Rather, it's coming out of the BERA bond measure. And I think it's very appropriate. As we know, BERA is primarily deals with retention and recruitment of not just certificated. I think there's some people that think that it's just certificated employees, but it's not. It's classified employees as well. And that's the whole purpose of this commission, is the recruitment and retention of classified employees. So I think the money for an administrative assistant coming from BERA is a very, very appropriate solution to this issue that we were having. And I also want to add, I think that Chairperson Goldstein mentioned how difficult minutes are. I've written minutes many times in my career, and they are very hard to write. And I do want to appreciate our administrative assistant for the fantastic job that she does in writing these minutes. It's a testament to the fact that we only have a few items that we ask questions about in the minutes. And with that, that's my report, Madam Chairman.
Super, thank you. I'll add just a few comments. In May, at a May 4th meeting, we talked about having 3 special meetings to cover some items of, fairly urgent importance. One was to sort of do a mid-course check-in on how the class and comp study is doing. And we did that both at the 531 meeting, where we heard a report from Eric Hall and Associates that was very useful. And that generated some questions. And based on that, I will thank in advance Sarah, our AA, for doing a whole lot of data collection that we will talk about when we talk about item 9F and what we've learned about what the participation was in phase 1 of the study. And I think the findings were interesting, which is why I'd like to discuss it. We also talked about 2 other special meetings that we really haven't had yet. And I think they are still on the radar. And I just want to make sure that we, still keep them there because they are important and urgent. One was to try to have sort of a work session about filling vacancies. And I'm aware that we need a bunch of stakeholders for that, and we need yet more data collection for that. Still on the radar, still very important. So, we will look forward to that being scheduled, I hope, early in the beginning of the next school year. And then the other was to do a deep dive with our stakeholders on how we recruit. And included in this, I think, is enforcement on hiring from existing lists. I know this has been a concern for a number of us, and it is related to vacancies as well, but it's also a different topic. So just kind of keeping that on my radar. And that's my comment. Okay. And Secretary, would you like to make your report?
Yes, thank you. I too would like to thank firstly the superintendent, John Calise, who's here. The support for the 0.5 came with various conversations. I'd like to thank the commissioners as well. It is going to be a big help for everyone, all classified employees moving forward. So I'm very grateful for that. Thank you. I also want to thank BCCE as well, because I think in my 2 years here, we haven't always agreed, but I've always appreciated the honesty. They're forthcoming with information. And even when I've had to take a position that disagreed, I've never questioned the advocacy. And that's not always been the case with unions that I've worked with in other districts. So I think BCCE members are lucky to have these folks as their representatives. So thank you. And thank you for your support as well. I know that you do support what we do. I'm going to keep the report short because I know that we have a large agenda and we have the class and comp. The one thing I'll say, I know that it's on the horizon. I hope to have a more developed report, but there is legislation, Assembly Bill 1699, which is of some concern, only because it does change a little bit about what we do and how we do it. Roughly, the bill involves classified employees who are not in merit districts, I guess, maybe that's why it was written, to, if they have permanent status and they meet the MQs, they just automatically can get the position. So obviously that changes our business model somewhat. So I hope to have a more thorough report, maybe in our next meeting, maybe over the summer. But I have been talking to some of my colleagues, and this generally, I guess it's going with very little opposition right now, because we're 99 districts and there's 698 school districts in the state of California. So, you know, we'll see where this goes, but I'll be able to, hopefully by the next meeting, have a more informed report for you. Okay, that's my report for now. And I know should we go right to E?
Do you want to just go over hiring and, you know, the quick stats?
I do. Thank you. I was so lost in the moment. I forgot.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We had 181 total exams, which is again a testament to Erin and her team and all the work they do. Now that I'm in the office, I have to quietly come in on many occasions because they're usually running an exam in the office. We had 86 training and experience exams, 74 written exams, 13 oral exams, and 8 performance exams. So again, another very successful month of exams with a lot of movement moving forward. So we're really happy to report that. Thank you.
Super. I'll also note that for the new hire report, you know, great job bringing 9 new people into BUSD. It's just still really fierce out there and hard to get folks. So happy to see that. You want to move on to class and comp?
Yeah, I have a report. There were 137 employees in phase 2, 35 supervisors, and 51 job classes. The deadline was June 9th, but I extended it based on the feedback we got at the last meeting and feedback from our friends at BCCE. So it was extended to June 12th. We also, Sarah and EHA helped accommodate a few folks that were actually at a conference. So we really went above and beyond to make sure participation was higher. Right now, the JCQ count is 60 completed, 49 in progress. It's a 44% completion rate, which is up 14% from phase 1. And we know this is a difficult time because, you know, we're nearing the end of the school year. But I think the interview process is probably going to elicit more participation, frankly. So we hope that number goes up. It's my understanding that the EHA team incorporated feedback into the job descriptions. The supervisors are going to receive them for their employees for review only. And up next is the interview process for employees and supervisors to discuss in real time everything that was taken from the JCQs. And we hope that interviews should begin after July 5th and hopefully continue through July 21st, hopefully longer. Right now, we're trying to get EHA. A few of those folks are out, so we're hoping to get them. And you know, it's summertime, and as we know, this is my second summer here. Summer is challenging to schedule, just even under the best circumstances. But we're still going to be pushing forward over the summer.
May I ask a question
Sure.
about that, just to make sure I understood? We're trying to round up EHA folks or our employees to be interviewed?
All of the above.
Everybody?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Because in this phase 2, we had 10, 11, and 12 month employees?
Some, yes, it's my understanding. Yes.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
So the 11 and the 10s are gone for the break, right?
The only group that's not all of them currently working are the school bus drivers. So, but we
Got
will
it.
have some available during summer school that can participate in interviews.
Okay, nice. Thank you.
And the last steering committee was on June 6th. You saw that we're in the process of choosing 7 preferred comparison districts. And I think that at the last steering committee meeting, it was brought up that we want to meet more frequently. But right now, I don't know that there's a lot to present until we can get these interviews done so that we have something a little more substantial to discuss. I think that's it. It's a very robust report. And I know BCCE is here and they want to speak to it, so I won't take up any more time. So that's my report.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, could I ask one question, Madam Chairperson?
Please.
I think you mentioned that there were a substantial number of completed questionnaires, but that there was also a pretty substantial number of questionnaires that were in progress. And I remember in phase 1, there was also quite a few that were in progress, which, was just something I, for one, hadn't thought about previously. Is there any way, and maybe this is not possible to be done, and maybe even BCCE can help with this, but is there any way to reach out to the people, to the employees who are in progress? And there may be all sorts of reasons, who knows why it isn't completed. Maybe it's a very small amount has been completed and they just didn't feel like doing the rest, or maybe they're just a little tiny bit, or there's a little technical glitch and they can't get over that technical glitch. I wonder if there's any way of anyone reaching out to some of these employees to get as many of the ones that are in progress completed so that they can be incorporated into the study too.
Yeah, well, I know Sarah does most of this. I do some of it, but we do follow up, especially with those that are incomplete. I know Sarah did meet with Mark. I think Mark is remote right now, so he's here. To give the paper apps to some of the security officers. So we are doing a lot more. I don't want to use the word aggressive because that has a negative connotation, but we are more proactive, I guess, is a way to put it in this phase. Sarah's calling a lot more people than in phase 1. Do you want to add anything?
Well, I did contact everyone that was on the list as completed, or I'm sorry, in progress, just before the first deadline. I didn't do that when we had our second deadline because there wasn't that much time in between. Unfortunately, EHA has to have a cutoff date for the JCQ so that they have their team incorporate all of the information from the JCQ into the job description. So at this point, if those in progress JCQs were to be actually completed, I suppose they could probably be incorporated into the job descriptions, but probably the next best step is the interview process, to be sure to try to get everyone who was in progress to at least participate in an interview so that that information can be incorporated into the job description.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you. Thank you very much.
No more questions? No more. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. And I know it's going to be challenging during the summer. Appreciate the extra effort to try to scare up as much participation as we can. Let's move on to item 7. These are our consent items, our eligibility lists. We have 9. I think we have 9, right? 9 at this meeting. Is there any brief discussion before voting?
I looked at them, then they're very robust lists. I'm just going, some of them are not so robust, like the instructional specialist for dance, but that's a very specialized, I certainly couldn't apply for that. So no, I didn't have questions about any of the lists.
Okay,
That I
I'll
can
take that
think
at
of.
face value. All
Yeah.
right.
Did you have?
I don't have any questions, just, as you know, I do stats on these. And for the, these lists, for the 9, the interval between testing, is about 12 and a half days. Much appreciated. I realize you still have a big volume, and this doesn't cover some of the temporary hiring and other things that I know you're also doing. So, appreciate that the interval, that the testing is speedy and, is happening. There was one I was curious about, and it was just list G, the school administrative assistant, which was a 30-day interval. That was sort of the outlier. And I just am wondering circumstances behind that. All right, if we don't remember, that's all right. No, I just appreciate it. And anything, that just is an outlier. If it's something institutional or structural, or if it was just someone was out of town on a vacation, I get it. Something I took as hopeful was nutrition services assistant is one of those high velocity roles that we have. And we had 3 ranks. Woohoo, and so but that's good. So thank you. Yeah. Yeah, no other comments from me.
Well, as a follow-up, if I remember correctly, I haven't turned back to it, but in addition, I think 2 of the new hires, if I recall, were nutritional services assistants as well. So, I mean, that has been kind of notoriously difficult for us to hire and recruit for. And the fact that we have a robust list, as well as having hired 2 additional ones. And, I don't know. I think there was at some point some discussion. It's not our role. We don't participate in figuring out what the schedule should be and all that. But my understanding was one of the obstacles to recruiting nutritional assistants was the fact that they sometimes work in multiple schools, multiple sites, and they have to go from one site to the other site, and that's difficult. And I think that Samantha Tobias Espinoza was telling us that that's something that the district was looking at, and I don't know what transpired, but to the extent that there are obstacles to the recruitment, then if anybody is aware of what those obstacles are, and if they're not obstacles that are critical to the position, then maybe there's something that can be done to prevent those obstacles from interfering with qualified applicants being recruited.
Like an e-bike to get from one place to the other.
Yeah,
Right?
good idea.
Well,
I don't
in
know.
that vein, one other thought I had, and it's really what prompted me to, in my remarks, talk about the fact that we still have these other 2 special meetings that we want to hold. A lot of it is figuring out recruiting pool, who can we recruit from? And when I saw the school campus aid list, which I didn't even count, there are just a lot of people on this list. And I looked at it and I thought, could some people on this list be persuaded to be interested in nutrition services work? Right?
Yeah.
Because we have their attention, they're certainly qualified for one thing. And just if we have a special meeting, just trying to brainstorm, is this a good idea? Is this not a good idea? What other good ideas do we have, to kind of harvest people we do know about and direct them to other places?
I would want to look at the MQs, obviously, and I'm not opposed to it. I'm always open to any ideas that are outside the box. I don't normally do that, but I'm not opposed to it. I think what Aaron and I would do is probably look at the candidates and then compare MQs and start there,
Right. And,
Yeah.
there may be some changes needed to training or certifications.
definitely.
But,
Yeah,
you know,
Ben Bonnie,
Yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
what made me think of it is just when you're a school campus aide, you are also on site for a limited period of time.
Yeah.
These are not people who are looking for a full-time FTE.
Yeah,
And that alone made me think maybe they'd be worthwhile.
Yeah.
To talk to.
it's a good point.
That's all.
All right, are we ready to?
Well, if there's nothing else, then I would move ratification of items 7A through I.
And I second. So it is done. Let's move on to our conference items. Secretary, would you kindly give us the narrative on the first one, 8A for Dante Gallon?
Absolutely. So, I've been here long enough to start one story and end it with a happy ending. I think the first time we had Mr. Gallon before us, it was an issue regarding his application. He couldn't get on all these things that we were trying to work out. And now here we are, where I have an opportunity to review his background and be able to request on his behalf a step 5. And I strongly support it. I think putting aside what I wrote, because what I wrote is something that you could read, but I really would point the commissioners to the letters of the letter of recommendation by Christie and some of the things that his principals have said, and his dedication to his AA and all the great things that are said about Mr. Gallon really speak for themselves. He has the letter from Renee Molina was the one that I thought was very powerful as well. And, he's been with Berkeley for a while. And, we always want to keep those employees that are working great for our kids. And he's fulfilled several capacities in acting assignments as well. And he's always stepped in when needed. So I think that given all of the evidence before me and his experience and his education, I definitely recommend a step 5 from Mr. Gallon. Thank you.
Questions?
I don't have too many questions. I agree. Reviewing the materials regarding Mr. Gallon, he absolutely is more than qualified for this position as site coordinator. And yes, the letters of recommendation are absolutely tremendous. So, and if I remember correctly, at our last meeting, we also did a step advancement for an equally qualified candidate or applicant for site coordinator. So we have done this in the past. I have to point out that under our rules, in order to do a step advancement, it has to be determined that the position is difficult to recruit for or difficult to retain. And I think, Mr. Executive Director, you confirmed that this position is, although it's a new position, has a lot of specialization about it and is not easy to find qualified candidates, and therefore fits within the parameters for a step advancement. I just want to make sure that's correct.
Definitely. And just the one thing that makes this position or situation unique is that because it is a new position, Mr. Gallon comes in with the experience that he can share with his colleagues. He can come in, hit the ground running, so to speak. So in that regard, it serves the district to have someone with his experience, and because of that, because it is difficult. It's brand new.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Great, thank you. A comment I'll make also is that, I know districts are fond of saying everybody is an educator. The after-school program, that's really true, though. It's a different kind of education. It's still very important. And when I look at the salary range, one of the things I think is right is that, for an entering teacher, probably, and I'm not exactly sure that the hourly, matches up directly to the hourly equivalent for a salaried first-year teacher. But, these are all in the same ballpark.
Yeah.
And I think that is BUSD's way of saying, that they get and understand that after-school program needs to be high quality, that these are educators, and that we want to attract the right kind of talent to do that work. So I am fine with this also.
You want to make the motion?
I'll make the motion. I motion that we approve placement to step 5 for Dante Gallen.
And I second.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Dante's actually here.
Mhm.
And he'd like to speak.
Did you want to speak?
Sure.
Don't mess it up.
Is it on? Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for letting me be here. I appreciate all the kind words. I am very dedicated. If you look, I spent all these years working in after-school programs and in school and maintaining a 4.0. I'm very serious about education. And I'm going to say, especially educating people that look like me, which is why, as you can see on my recommendation letter, I do the affinity group at BAM as well. I'm super dedicated to this work. So I really appreciate all the nice things that were said about me. And yeah, I'm ready to work. So thank
Great.
you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for coming.
Should we move on to
Yes.
8B?
So our next employee who's made the request, Ashley Hester, Commissioner Roeder just mentioned a hard to fill area. Nutrition services is, as we all know, dreadfully difficult to fill, especially our satellite operators. Ashley comes with, I guess, a little less straightforward experience, but you'll notice that she has the management experience in 2 places. She is supervised the deli clerk at Safeway. Anybody who's ever been to Safeway knows that is not an easy job. The shift leader, so she's demonstrated a lot of supervisory independent experience. All of this experience, by the way, there is a nexus between the work and the MQs, so it's applicable. She's requested the step 5, and I think between the places that she's worked, you can basically come up with the 5. So I am supportive of that. I think between the 2 years experience as a manager and the 4 months, we're really looking at, if we're doing the math, it's about 4.5 years. That said, given that it's a difficult position to fill, I felt I could have done step 4, but we're really trying hard to recruit and retain for nutrition services. So that's why I'm advocating for a step 5. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments, questions?
The only comment I'd make, I agree, I concur with the step 5 placement for all the reasons you set forth. I'm pleased that in reviewing the prior experience, we're not limiting ourselves in certain positions, not limiting ourselves to necessarily school district or public agency. I think school district and public agency experience is tremendously important and useful, but one can gain in certain positions. It's not true necessarily for every single position, but in nutrition services, it certainly is. You can gain the necessary experience outside of a public agency or school district. So I'm pleased that you took that into consideration, Mr. Executive Director. That's all that I have.
Thank you.
Super. I really just have one question, which is, remind me, this is an 11-month or a 12-month? Is it?
It's 11. Oh, it's 10. Sorry. It's 10.
It's a 10.
Yeah, school. I thought it was 11. They don't do this. Okay, I stand corrected.
Right. And I guess the question is, I know Berkeley does meals at certain locations.
Right.
Is it not the same staff, or is it just this role doesn't play into that?
Yeah, so summer school is staffed differently. So there's usually like a posting that goes out in April. And then those that wish to work summer school have to apply, and they're placed in assignments based on seniority. So
Got it.
the actual, all of the nutrition services positions are 10 months. There's an option to work, but there are very few assignments that are offered during the summer.
Right, right. Smaller volume. So this is someone who would really be starting in August, right?
Yes.
Okay, I move that Ashley Hester be advanced place to step 5 for the nutrition services satellite operated one.
It's a mouthful, isn't it?
Yes, was on a different piece of
Title,
paper.
yeah.
Yeah. And I concur.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to 8C, Secretary, if you would.
Yes, so another hard to fill position. Rita Shretha. She has the, much like the last meeting, she has the Child Development Teaching Associate Teaching Permit, Child Development Associate Teaching Permit. And she has the experience, again, somewhat not district experience, but to Commissioner Roeder's point, I believe YMCA East Bay, not a classroom in traditional sense, but she worked with the literacy programs there. She did the lesson plans, lesson planning, very, very, very similar work to classroom work. And I think that gives her the experience that she would need to do the job. She has the year's experience. So again, I'm supporting step 5. We want to make sure that she comes in. Let's see. I wanted to mention supporting step 3, 1 year for teaching and 1 year for the education. So what I meant to say there was that I'm counting both experience towards the 5. So I could have stopped at 3, but I'm counting the education and towards the request.
Got it. Thank you. Comment, question?
Well, I'm a little confused.
Okay.
And that is that in your, Mr. Executive Director, in your written executive director's recommendation, it does say classified personnel recommends.
Oh,
the
the 3. Sorry.
Step 3
Mhm.
of the schedule, although she had requested step
Yeah,
5.
Forgive
So
me.
I'm wondering whether you have changed that recommendation.
No,
or
I have
just
not.
misspoke.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. What I meant to say was I could only give, and I think what I read here, I read it wrong. Look, I'm reminding myself now, forgive me. She was requesting the step 5, but I could only find the nexus, and I'm supporting the 3 because of the year of the teaching and the year of the education. But I couldn't support the 5, which is what she requested based on that. So sorry, I misspoke. The
Okay.
reverse of what I said initially. Sorry.
Okay. Now I'm not confused anymore.
Sorry.
And I'm just wondering whether she, Ms. Shrestha, is here or anybody is here to speak on her behalf. Just want to hear what
I
she has to
don't
say.
see her in the room.
Okay.
Or the Zoom, right?
Or the virtual room either.
Do you have any idea, when the request came in for step 5,
Mm,
it just sort of makes me wonder, do we give any sort of guidance when new employees are coming on about, what constitutes each step, or, how we do this?
we don't give guidance, but we send out a packet and we send out samples of the request. So in the description, we'll say this is going to be requested. There has to be the years of experience to qualify for the step. So we kind of lay out in the description when we send the packet out how that works.
And we sort of lay out, it's a 1-for-1. If you've had a year of relevant experience, typically we'll assign a step credit.
Yeah, it's a 1-for-1. And again, I'm sorry I misspoke, but I do know that in looking at hers, like I look at everyone's, I was trying really hard to give the employee the request whenever I can.
Mhm.
But no, we do a pretty decent job of when we send the packet out, we send out a description of how it
Mhm.
works.
I'm glad to hear that. And it's, you know, I think sometimes it's hard because I know sometimes, you know, packets are big and they're overwhelming and people don't read everything.
Right.
And sometimes, you know, they just take a flyer and think, well, I'm going to ask for the max and, you know, see what they give me, or they think they have experience that's relevant, you know, that, you know, we later determine might not be. The outcome I'm trying to avoid is someone who wants to hire on at the district,
Yeah.
you know, kind of contingent on a placement.
Yeah.
And then they get news back that, you know, the placement's not going to be what they expected.
Right.
And then everybody has burned a whole lot of time for something that doesn't come to fruition.
Yeah.
That's what I'm struggling to think about. How could we do it better?
Well, I mean, to be honest, Chairperson, I mean, part of the reason why I probably spoke was I remember leaving her a message and trying to reach out to her because maybe there's something I was missing. Because like I said, you know, I always do try to give the experience when it counts. If there's a nexus between agencies and the work, I will do it. But, you know, given that this is all I had, we went with
Right.
a 3.
Okay. All right. Thank you. No, and I appreciate hearing that you've reached out, you know, if you came to a different conclusion from.
I
what
reached
the
out by
new hire
phone
asked for.
because I usually reach out by phone because I always try to talk to the person.
Sure.
Because if I'm going to present something that disagrees with their request, I wanted them to know why before the meeting, but I could not get a hold of her.
Okay. No, thank you. I appreciate the explanation.
Yeah, I'm very sensitive, also, Chairperson Goldstein, to your comments. I was thinking the same thing, that the last thing we would want is for the person to be disappointed by a step advance placement. I mean, a step advance placement is an exception to the rule. I mean, the rule says that we're to place new hires at step 1. But in certain circumstances, this being one of them, we can place them at a higher step. But again, it's an exception to the rule. So I guess my only comment would be, and I don't disagree with you at all, Mr. Executive Director, in terms of step 3, that maybe when, assuming that, you know, we make a motion and she gets the step 3 is approved, that once again, you try to explain to her the reasoning. It's not a reflection. I mean, I've done negotiations long enough to know you don't get what you don't ask for.
Right.
So, you know, if you're gonna ask for a step advancement, ask for step 5, and
Yeah,
you
might
know,
as well.
maybe you'll get 4, maybe you'll get 3. You
Mhm,
know,
mhm.
and that's fine, and that's absolutely okay. But I don't want her to come away disappointed by the action that we may take.
I think there's another dimension also. You know, disappointment is one, and, you know, we're all grown-ups and sometimes you have disappointments. Something I am sensitive to more and more as the years go on is you never know somebody's exact circumstances. This is not a full-time job, you know, I have no idea about the other circumstances. But when it's an hourly wage that is kind of bordering on, you know, a working poor wage, you know, sometimes the placement really matters because can't take the job if it doesn't pay, you know, I'm making this up, $22 an hour or
Yeah.
something, you know, it's just not going to cover the bills. So, you know, that's another dynamic we have more and more. And you know, I don't know if our class and comp study will help reduce that dynamic or not. I don't know if the district will be in a position, you know, to put focus there, but this is an expensive area.
Well, I may just mention that there have been instances in which you've disagreed with my recommendation and have done more. In my position, I have to go with what I'm presented. So, you know, saying that, you could always do more than I've recommended, but I can only recommend based on the materials I have before me.
That makes sense. And I think you reached out additionally, it sounds like actually you didn't get a call back. Is that what?
Well, I had a blinking message at my phone, so I don't know, maybe.
Erin's raising her hand. Please.
Yes, and all applicants who submit a step advance request are then invited to this meeting so that they could speak to the step advance
Got it.
request and the recommendation that Secretary Castillo made. So that
Okay.
could be another option and an avenue for them to speak to you directly.
Thank you. Okay, appreciate that. I don't think I have any other comments.
Okay, then I would move that Rita Shrestha be placed at step 3 in accordance with our executive director's recommendation.
And I second. Okay. Very good. Let's go on to 8D. Secretary, if you would.
Yes, and before I get started, I wanted to make, there are two classifications being presented. Our Executive Director of Facilities, John Calise, is here, so he can speak to any questions you may have beyond my ability. But I want to make a correction to the job title for 8E. Right now, it says Safety and Risk Coordinator. It's actually just Safety Coordinator. So we're going to delete the and risk out of the title.
That's interesting. Is that because, is that a change the board made or
Well,
is that a typo or?
I think I'm going to speak to it a bit. I think John can speak to it. Do you want Mr. Calise to speak to it now or?
After your report,
Okay,
please.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So starting with the establishment of the Director of Facilities and Maintenance and Operations. And this is elaborated on much greater at when the board minutes. But there's a large bond program in Berkeley and BUSD, a lot of capital projects. There are many simultaneous high cost projects, capital improvement projects that are constantly happening. And this is really stemming from Mr. Calise needing help to manage those. He currently has the executive director. He has a facilities planning analyst and executive assistant. And this would basically add to that so that he has the ability to manage these programs. It's going to fulfill a lot of these vendor relationships, a lot of the bond obligations and publicly funded programs, and looking at the job and looking at where it should be placed. I am recommending that it be placed at the Schedule 52, Range 85. That is where our Director of IT is right now. So that's where it would be, just to give you a frame of reference. And the annual range there is 135 to 165. I think that makes it competitive for that type of role in terms of salary. And last but not least, this person would act as the second in command if Mr. Calise is not in the office, so that these things continue to roll forward. And my own experience, having visited Mr. Calise on several occasions and getting to know Parker where he is there's certainly a lot going on facilities wise in the BUSD. So I support it. And Mr. Calise is here if there's any more questions or if there's any questions for me. Thanks.
Thank you. John, would you like to speak to any of these?
Thank you. I appreciate it. How are you today? So to Executive Director Castillo's point, this position would absolutely help with the daily management of the facilities of the bond program, but it's actually a little bit greater than that. Right now, the role that I'm in has actually grown exponentially over the last 4 years since my predecessors have sat in it. And there's a lot more work that's done at the district level than ever was done before. The role of Executive Director of Facilities has grown also from a facilities perspective in the sense that we do a lot more program management now, but we also do a lot more with community. We do a much more robust community engagement program, et cetera. While doing all of this and actually still trying to plan out bond projects, which understand the typical life cycle for any construction project in a district, from the moment that you dream it up till the moment that you finish it, is anywhere from 2.5 to 7 years. So while trying to do all of that planning and then also planning issuances for when we issue the money, et cetera, I'm also trying to support our classified staff, our maintenance workers, our operations folks, custodial, ground security. That piece often falls by the wayside. It's very difficult to be planning out a $60 million modernization and getting interruptions for fire alarms and lack of supplies and things like that, but it's part of the day-to-day. So what we envisioned this role to be was really to allow me to work on the higher level, the bigger picture, whether it be for budgeting purposes or program purposes, albeit for facilities or maintenance budgets, operations budgets, et cetera. And this position would oversee the day-to-day over the maintenance and operations teams, as well as the daily construction work that's happening. I'll still be involved in that, of course, but just at a little bit of a higher level.
Super, thank you. And I am guessing we're going to have questions. If you don't mind staying at the lectern for a minute, we
Not
can.
at all.
I have more in the nature of a comment. And I think that it's clear to me anyway, that the role of the executive director currently is it's too diverse, and the day-to-day, as you've explained it, falls by the wayside, and that's not good for anybody. But at the same time, we also have to budget for, as you say, $60 million projects. And I know the amount of time that you've put into the parking garage, for example, is huge. And you didn't mention, I don't think, the fact that you also interact with the public, interact with the Board of Education. And those are all, very important jobs for the district, but it's not just as important, but it's equally important that the day-to-day work does not get sloughed off. So I'm totally in support of creating this position. I did want to mention something about the role of the Personnel Commission. I mean, I think it's on June 7th. On June 7th of this month, the Board of Education approved this position, this new position,
Right.
and set forth the duties for that position, as are sort of illustrated by the job description. The Personnel Commission, I appreciate your 100%, your explanation to us, because it informs us a great deal about what this position is for, what's it intended to do, how it diverges from the work that you do, and things like that. That's very important to know, but we can't second guess what the Board of Education has already decided. Our role, now that it's been decided, and this is all in the education code, our role is now to look at the minimum qualifications, to make sure that the minimum qualifications are appropriate, and then to place the salary range in an appropriate level within our existing sort of hierarchy of salaries. That's the job as set forth in the education code of the Personnel Commission, and we take that very, very seriously, and that's what we're trying to do. I think it's sometimes appropriate if there's something that we see in the job description, in the duties, maybe, I mean, we're not potted palms. So if we see something that looks odd, and we've done this, and it causes a delay, we say, well, this doesn't look right, or maybe the union lets us know that this doesn't seem right. We might go back and suggest to the Board of Education a tweak, a change in the duties, but that job is the function of the Board of Education. It's not the job of the Personnel Commission. And I think sometimes there's some confusion around those two roles. But yeah, I'm in support of this position, and in support of the placement on the salary range. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I have one question for Secretary Castillo,
Sure.
and then I have just a couple questions for John. So Schedule 52, this is an unrepresented management position.
Yes.
And I went looking for Schedule 52 and I was having trouble finding it. Where does this schedule live?
You know, for me, it's a holdover from the unrepresented. When I look on the web, I mean, I don't have my computer in front of me, but when you look on the web page
Mhm.
for unrepresented, it says Schedule 52 next to it. So that's what I was using.
Okay.
So that's the schedule
Wow.
that's on.
How
the
did I
webpage.
miss that? Okay. All right. Got
So
it.
if you
So
go-
it is a very specific unrepresented management schedule.
That's my understanding. Yeah. I
It's
mean,
not a local 21 schedule is.
It's not.
No.
This
Okay.
is where our classified directors
Yeah.
live, such as the director of technology.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm on there too. It's the
right.
unrepresented.
Well, that was the thing, I was remembering when we hired you, what did
Yeah,
we do?
yeah.
And
There's
who knows what I was looking at, maybe before I had enough coffee.
There's the,
So,
it has so when you go to the web page and you list I think it's the link that talks about salaries.
Mhm.
It lists them in groups in BCCE 21 unrepresented, and then right under unrepresented,
Right.
there's two links,
Mhm.
and both links have Schedule 52 on them.
Super. Okay. Now, if you found it on the webpage, it was my error. I just wanted to make sure I knew where the
Mhm.
schedule came from. So, Executive Director Calise, my first question for you is, you look both ways when you cross the street, right?
Yes.
Good.
Plan on running me down. I'm
No, I would just hate that, the hit by the car scenario, is a real concern,
Sure.
when you're thin, right? When your
Yeah.
bench is thin. So, it's good to see, this being, I don't know what the word is, a little more depth, right?
Mhm.
To cover things.
Mhm.
I'm also mindful that one of the many projects of the district is the workforce housing at the Berkeley Adult School. Which last time I saw you said was, sort of going right along, proceeding apace, getting its funding. I am wondering if there's a dimension of that is also falling to your department or your organization. One is getting it built, right?
Yeah.
Another is taking care of it and sort of administering, how it's used, who's on it, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know that I have seen a lot about that apparatus. I'm
Yeah.
just wondering what you can share.
Yeah, so I can share everything, but there's a lot of front end work that the district is doing and has been doing for the last several years. And that's all fallen under my office. And that had to do with everything from the feasibility study, right, to going out an RFQ for a feasibility study, doing the feasibility study, and then actually going out and doing RFQPs to find a design builder, to work with them, to actually work with our classified and our teachers to come up with design committees to actually envision what does this look like. And currently what we're doing is we're working with a governance committee. And the governance committee, again, it includes our labor partners as well as the developer and us. And what that's to really determine is once the building is built and occupied, how is it governed? How long can people live there? What happens if they quit? All these different things, the nuances that you have to determine. That being said, the way that we structured the arrangement on workforce housing is facilities has overseen everything from conception to when the keys are handed over. Beyond that, it's actually on the developer. We're doing a 99-year land lease for the developer to build it and maintain it. The way the developer does that, and I hope I'm answering your question.
You are.
But the way the developer does that is they do that through a myriad of tax credits because it's affordable housing. And then they also do it through traditional financing and rents that are collected. Those rents can actually go up to 100%, 120% of the AMI, but they are based on salary. So actually a great number of our classified employees will benefit from our workforce housing project. The project itself, which is slated still on track to break ground. I believe it's next year. I don't have the schedule in front of me, but will consist of 110 units.
Super. All right. Thank you. Thank you. So what I think I'm hearing is your organization has it until it's occupancy ready. And
Correct.
then the developer manages the governance, the day-to-day, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct. We will have to establish with the board some type of like an oversight committee to actually make sure that the developer lives up to the governance that we sign a contract on,
Mhm.
right? And that governance will be everything from as high level to how are you renting the apartments and how long do people stay there, to even down to the minutia of when somebody submits a work request for something broken in their apartment, what's your turnaround time,
Mhm.
right? Because what we don't want to do is spend all this time and all this effort to offer affordable housing to our staff and for it to turn into a tenement, right? This is a beautiful building that we're putting up. And I will add that with the exception of one project 3 months ahead of us, that actually took 3 districts to come together to do it, we will be the first one in the state to offer housing solely for workforce for educators.
Great. So then that little bit of oversight, on the developer, that will live in your organization, or that's sort of TBD?
Sort of TBD. I would say more than likely it will. I'll go on record and say it because I've said it at the board meeting many times. Facilities department sort of serves as the junk drawer for the district. And what I mean is we have a very, very we have a very set charge of what we're responsible for. But then as other things come in that were never there and we got to figure out where to put it, we put it in facilities. That's how I wound up doing all what I did with COVID for all those years.
Right. So you're the equivalent of alcohol, tobacco, and firearms for the US government, right? They seem to get
analogy here.
but they get a lot of diverse stuff as an agency. Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Not, well, yeah, maybe you should stay up there, John. Thank you. Again, more in the nature of a comment, which is, well, and a question, which is that I really appreciate you as the executive director, and it doesn't always happen, but for us, it's really useful to have the director whose department it is that is seeking and it doesn't have to be a director position. It can be a supervisor, a manager, or another position. It's helpful to have that person here at the Personnel Commission when reviewing. I mean, this is kind of our one shot at reviewing these this job description. And as you can see, we have questions about it, and sometimes there's no answer, and then we have to delay it, or we say, well, it's not that important anyway. So it's really, I appreciate you very, very much for coming and spending your time to discuss this with us. So with that said, I look at the education requirements, education and experience, which look fine to me. And so 2 comments about that. And I think this is a good thing. It doesn't say anything in education and experience that the individual who applies for this position or even receives it has to have any experience in a public agency or in a school district. It doesn't even really say that that's desired. It just says you have to have experience in the administration of a maintenance and operations department at the manager level. So as I read it, you might be in the private sector and have developed skyscrapers or what have you. And if you've got that kind of experience, you meet the minimum qualifications. So the question is that understanding accurate?
It is. And I'll speak to that for a moment if I can. It's accurate and it's strategically by design. So what we're seeing right now more and more in education across the state, and one of the reasons is it's a segue to leadership through executive cabinet. But what we're seeing is a lot of facilities directors who are actually being moved into that role are coming out as principals. So they're a principal at a school and they're jumping into facilities because it's a cabinet position and it's their intended segue to make it to superintendent. And by doing that, while many of them do a great job, we're also seeing a lot of inefficiencies created in facilities as a whole, and a lot more dependency on consultants and a lot more costs to consultants. The reality is when it comes to managing maintenance, when it comes to managing operations, when it comes to managing daily construction, you can take someone out of the private sector and absolutely teach them the nuances of it being a school district much easier than you can take a principal, for example. No disrespect to principals, I can't do what they do. and try to teach them the nuances of maintenance or of operations or of construction. For example, we have sitting here, right? We have Frank here from BCCE, and Frank is an electrician. But I would never want to take someone who has never done anything with electrical and try to teach them Frank's job, as opposed to try to teach somebody like Frank in the private sector how to do that job. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And
It's very
that's exactly
technical
what
work.
I was thinking too.
Yeah.
So I agree with that. So also, following up on that is I would ask you to please, and I know you work very closely with our executive director on a lot of projects, on our recruitment for this position. It may not be enough to just post something on NeoGov, for example, and expect to get the kind of experience that you've just described. We have to be a little bit more creative, I think, not just for this position, but especially for this position, but other positions, to reach out into sectors of the market that we're not used to reaching out to. And seeing if we can draw qualified applicants. And I think we would look to you and others in facilities to give us some creative ideas, to give Aaron, to give Charlie some creative ideas about where we can put, whether it's advertisements or social media or whatever it might be, in places where people who are qualified would apply.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Now, I'll say that I've been working on this with our superintendent for quite some time. And just as happenstance, really, the timing on it is almost serendipitous, because like educators, right, this is the time of year where even facilities folks are getting a little bit burnt out and thinking about a change. So the timing is good, but I agree with you that utilizing those other platforms to really bring in the most qualified applicants is the way to go. And I have some thoughts in mind already to share with your executive director.
Great. Thank you so much. That's all I have, Madam Chairperson.
Great. I hope also maybe some personal references. Always a good way to go. I don't have any other questions on this.
Okay, well, then I would move approval of the position of Director, Facilities Maintenance and Operations. Before I do that, can we just confirm that there isn't anybody else online or in the audience who wants to speak to this?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I
Just want to be sure.
the only person I see right now in the room is Jocelyn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nobody else? Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
Okay, great. In that case, I make the motion to approve the position of Director, Facilities Maintenance and Operations in the salary range that was provided to us by our Executive Director with the minimum qualifications and knowledge and abilities that are set forth in the job description.
I second all that. So that's approved.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Let's move on to 8E.
Okay, our next position, and Executive Director Calise may speak to this one as well. I know that Executive Director Calise and I started talking about this position months ago. And I know that the genesis of this is from a board resolution back in June 29th of 2022. Really in response to the mass shootings, the safety at the schools being a real issue. And, I think I can't speak to the delay per se, but I will speak to the fact that it's a very complicated position with a lot to do. I did look at the MQs and was trying to figure out, is this a risk manager? Is this strictly a safety person? Is it a facilities person? Is it an administration? It's actually all of the above. So if you look at the MQs, it's a bachelor's degree in public administration, risk management, safety, occupational health, or related field, with the idea being that in any one of those areas, this person would have the ability to design, implement, work with our executive director to kind of say, this is the safety programs I think we should put at the schools. This is the training that's involved, and that kind of thing. I thought that those were important aspects to have as a minimum. if you look at the desired, to Commissioner Roeder's point, I don't ever want to limit only government experience, but when you're looking at desired qualifications, I did think that having to work through all the red tape and all the bureaucracy that we have to deal with would probably be a plus. So it's a desired qualification to have the experience in municipal government. I think that administering safety codes I thought was important. Risk management certification, again, this is not a risk manager, which is why Executive Director Calise asked that I take the risk out of it, because we don't want to give the impression that they're going to be doing risk management. However, there are a lot of translatable kind of skills that can go from one to the other. So you'll see it mentioned in the MQs, you'll see it mentioned throughout. You'll notice too in the board approved functions, which I think was very, very informative for me to decide what those MQs would be. Risk, if you look at the representative duties, they're labeled and entitled as risk management, analysis, continual process improvement, policy administration, communication, compliance, and training. I think that was driving the decision for the public administration and in the BA. And then in terms of salary, we have a sustainability coordinator in local 21 at range 64. And I looked at the sustainability coordinator position in terms of duties and responsibilities. And I thought that it was a very comparable range. Also looking at some of the comparable jobs, and I hesitate here because when I first started working with Mr. Calise, I tried to come up with safety coordinator as a title, and I didn't find it. I found risk managers, I found safety, different iterations of the title, but basically the function. They all came back around the salary range. So I think that it's a fair range, it's a competitive range. And I think Mr. Calise agreed with it. So I'm good to move it forward. So if there's any other questions for me, I'd be more than happy to answer, but of course we have the expert in the room, so you may want to defer to Mr. Calise. Thank you.
Commissioner Roeder, would you like to start?
Well, I would like to hear from Mr. Calise about this
Okay.
position.
Okay, thank you. So first I'll address the inaccuracy in the title, and I don't know how that happened. I don't know if it happened prior to the board meeting, after the board meeting, but we'll address it. The primary reason for it is this is a safety coordinator. In any safety or security position, there is a risk management aspect. That being said, when you hear the term risk management, whether it be in schools or even in corporate America, immediately what you go to is workers' comp and slip, trip, and falls and things like that. And what we don't want, and the intention of this position, and the board knows this, was never to become the district's risk manager, right? This isn't to deal with workers' comp. What this is actually for, the intent of this position as it was originally, and it's morphed over the years with the security concerns that have happened. The intention of this position was more originally thought out to be almost like a physical risk manager, to help us preemptively stop those slip, trips, and falls, to help us preemptively stop where people are getting hurt, whether it be students and staff. As it morphed into the security concern, originally there was a large contingent basically wanting us to create like a one-person police force. That's not what this is either. What it is it's someone to work very closely with facilities in addition to the work from the risk perspective, but also to help to identify where those vulnerabilities are. We have a threat and vulnerability assessment, but it's very large scale, right? But to help us identify from a safety perspective and a security perspective, what can we do, right? What can we do quickly? How do we also make sure that our staff district-wide is doing their part? Because it does take everyone. It's not a not all of the safety or security risks can be fixed with engineering controls. It's also about human behavior. So it's really the intent of this coordinator is to understand all local, state, federal codes and regulations, right? To push forth from a risk lens, but also from a safety lens to ensure that our schools and our campuses are the safest places that they can be for our students and our staff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So one question, and I've heard I'm no longer a parent in the district. I was at one time, but if I'm a parent, let's just say hypothetical, at Washington School, and if I have dropped off my child at Washington School, for example, and noticed that all the gates are always open, and they're always open all day long, and there's a great deal of possible vulnerability in terms of, and we'll just, I don't know if it's the elephant in the room, but there's been school shootings, there's just been such horrible events that have taken place in our country. And if I were to feel, and maybe some of my other parent colleagues were to feel that, we need more security. We need somebody to lock those gates. We need somebody to buzz people in, for example, for all sorts of, is this the individual that I would call with my concerns and who I would expect to help me, to explain to me what's being done, what can be done, if certain requests can't be done for whatever reasons, would explain that to me? Is that the position, one of the functions of this position?
It's the first line, absolutely, right? So a couple things. First is that there's a group of parents right now that have actually organized a safety committee, sort of a de facto safety committee of parents that are meeting with the district. And that has fallen under me, which again, junk drawer, right? So I'm running the safety part. That's great because it actually does align with facilities. Now, a lot of times, again, it aligns with not only human behavior, but human capital, right? So this person would actually try to figure out and understand, hey, are there SROs who should be doing this, right? Or is this something else that's needed? If it's something else that's needed, that's where the advocacy comes in. But to your question, this would be the first person. The hope is that you don't have to call them. The hope is that the safety committee that has been formed by the community actually gets enough traction and has enough meetings and enough movement that these things are actually discussed before you pick up that phone. Mm-hmm. That being said, you pick up the phone, you call them. If it's something that deals with behavior, they work with administration to deal with that. If it's something that deals through engineering controls, then they work with my office to deal with that. If it's something that deals with staffing, they would work with HR. But yes, they do become sort of that one-stop shop, at least until it's like, it has to move to facilities. Let me let you talk to Executive Director Calise. And then from there, it might be, well, we can't do it for these reasons, or we can do it, but this is the time that it takes. Because again, we always go back in facilities to 2.5 to 7 years is the life cycle. From conception to completion, that's the time it takes. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, pretty much. And it actually brings up something I hadn't thought about, although I'm totally aware of, and that is there have been issues and complaints by parents, some of them at Berkeley High and at other places about, for want of a better word, I'll call it bullying, and situations in which a group of students allegedly may have bullied another student. And so I think I'm hearing for you, Executive Director, that this coordinator would also be possibly a first line, literally be a coordinator, literally be somebody that they would go to, and then that person would refer or contact the appropriate department to actually, resolve the situation as best they can.
Yeah. So not ideally, let me rephrase that. So bullying is something that's completely different. That does fall under student services. Now, we try to make sure that all schools and all parents, right, understand that. But that being said, if this person, the safety coordinator, were to get the calls would be absolutely, let me get you in touch with our director of student services about this, because that's where that belongs. It's not, the role of this safety coordinator is to improve the overall safety for students and staff, but it's not designed with the expertise to address the individual needs of students. It's not a certificated position. It's not meant that way. It's really to look at it from a much larger holistic view, getting down into the granular levels of what can we do to stop it. And when you think of the granular question of what could we do to stop bullying, that's a whole other textbook, right? That's like the tax section of the library. It's much bigger. It's much more in depth than how do we deal with something through either staffing or engineering controls.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. So one observation I'll make is that the job description that was approved by the board includes the title Safety and Risk Coordinator. And there are a lot of places in this job description that talk about risk management.
Correct. Yeah.
So, I don't know how procedurally you want to fix this, but it seems to me it needs to be fixed.
Yeah. So
Right.
what I would suggest, if it's okay, is basically we can, because it is a good point, and it's not one that I considered prior to talking to Executive Director Castillo. So sorry. We can ask that the commission approve it as titled. And then what we can do is actually ask the board just to make an amendment, basically a clerical change. And once that's done, we can bring it back to the PC. But what that would actually do is allow us to start the process, right, of flying the position and hiring the position. Because this is something that honestly, I can't even speak to why it's taken as long as it has. I know either can Director Castillo, but it has taken quite some time. And it's an item that is considered urgent for the school district.
Okay. Think on that one. It's sort of the backwards process of how we work. I understand the urgency, and I'm just wondering, does the
It
board
really
meet?
plays to your point though earlier a little bit
Yeah.
about please don't get hit
Yeah.
by a bus.
Right.
Because if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, what it could turn into is then someone in the district trying to turn this into a risk manager, and let's just have them manage workers' comp. And we don't want to do that, right?
Well, no, the good news is that they have your concept, here.
Yeah.
What I wonder also, I don't know, let me cook on this in my head. Certainly if you took it back to the board, the places where we say risk management, I think what you mean is safety management.
No, we do mean risk, because risk is all of the things that are listed there. So it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. We could leave it as is, but it opens a potential fight later, and that's okay. Or we could try to address it later with the board and correct it and then come back to the commission. Regardless, because there is a big component of risk that deals with physical risk management that, again, whether it's school districts or corporate America, they don't view it like that, right? Because a lot of times they don't think about the proactive, they think about the reactive.
Right. And, in the job description, it under the risk management header, it identifies elements, that are not workers' comp elements, and I appreciate that. I wonder, there is a reference in here. Where am I looking? Under communication. I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth bullet down, facilitate the district-wide safety committee. And I too used to be a parent at BUSD, and I have a feeling the safety apparatus has probably changed a lot from my era. What I was aware of was certainly at the high school, there was a safety committee. I think some of the middle schools had safety committees. The dean, I wasn't aware there was a district-wide safety committee.
Yeah. So
I'm trying to understand again, how does this coordinate with sites?
So there's Berkeley, we have a lot of committees, right? So there are a number of school site-based committees, and those should live there. They should live at the school sites. They're an opportunity to discuss concerns and vet them, right? And then there's also safety committees specifically for BCCE as well as BFT. One of the gaps that we've noticed, really, myself and Glendale, who both sit on the BCCE Safety Committee in the past year and a half, and I think to some degree, even some of the folks in BCCE have noticed this, right? Is that there's things that get brought up internally as a problem, maybe at the high school, or maybe at Rosa Parks, right? Or maybe from BFT, or maybe from BCCE. But what fails to happen is they never all come together. So what the hope is really to, in addition to the individual committees that currently live and do belong at the school sites, and in addition to those are the committees with our labor partners, but really is to sort of create that parent organization, if you will, to really hear about all of the concerns and listen, so that we can not only talk about prioritizing safety, but put it into action. And the only way that we can do that is by truly listening to our students and staff.
So this would be a new committee, district-wide. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. A different sort of a follow-on question to your question about bullying. And this did occur to me in a slightly different way. I would imagine that as the first line, this role is going to get all kinds of calls. So, the comment I'll make is, and again, I'm not a BUSD parent anymore, so I may be a little behind on changes. When it pertains to behavior in students, Dr. Shelley in student services, it may still be running bullying
Absolutely.
response.
Yeah, that has,
Also, Jasmina Viteshik is the Title IX
correct.
coordinator and takes reports also. So what I would urge is this role would build strong relationships with both, because I can totally
Without a
see
doubt.
where this role would get those kinds of stray calls.
And that's one of the reasons why it is a coordinator position, is they really have to have the ability to build those strong relationships, not only with those two departments, but really district-wide with all department leaders, with all school leaders, et cetera.
A last question just about the minimum quals. What we don't have in here, I notice, is any specific amount of work experience, 5 years doing this or 3 years doing this, as you had in the other one. So I'm just wondering about that.
I think oversight, honestly, I think there's a little bit of oversight on our part there. And when I say our, I mean myself, I mean HR, and I even mean Director Castillo, because he just noticed, oh, that's right. But the reality is those MQs that are there, for example, the certificates, whether it be, I know there's a risk management certificate. I believe there was a fire inspector, and that was because of code analysis.
These were desired,
Right.
under the desired,
So
right?
Those certificates actually take X number of years to be on the job for and roll into those, become certificated in that, not certificated in the sense of teacher, but to obtain them. So with that, it's really in line with what we're seeking to find.
What kind of candidate do you think you would get for this? What would this person have done in the past?
Sure. I think ideally it could be any type of whether it be a code enforcement or a fire inspector position, it could be prior law enforcement. It really needs to be someone who is very much safety minded and safety oriented, but also somebody who could take that maybe the shorter version of the tax code, not the student services, but the other, and really understand it. It's also someone who has the ability, a strong ability, to do public speaking, but also facilitation, because there are a lot of different committees, a lot of different groups. There's a lot of parent organizations. And then there's also the ability to understand that we can do anything that we want to do, but we can't do everything. Because at the end of the day, we do have budget constraints, for number one. And number two, there's things that take time, right? And that goes back to the life cycle that I was just talking about before. I've had to speak to the board about that several times, where they're like, put access control on the schools now. Okay, we can do that, but it doesn't mean that it'll be there tomorrow, right? It's a new priority for the district, and it's one that I'm really glad that the district is adopting, but there's a process that we legally have to go through in order to do those things.
Okay. So last question, I guess, is for Secretary Castillo. I'm struggling with the process question of, do we have a problem or do we not have a problem with, the way the job description reads, which includes safety and risk versus what we have here. And I think if we're going to approve something, we should approve something that matches to what the board did. And if the board decides to change it later, they change it.
If the question for me is, can I recruit for this position? I can.
Well, as a safety and risk coordinator, I mean, right now, that's how it reads.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we stay with until we're told otherwise.
I think, can I make this a safety coordinator and still make it work with everything that's in there? I can. I think there's enough specificity regarding the education, the desired, and the duties to do it. I guess my trepidation, honestly, Chairperson, is to delay it further. I attached the resolution too, because
Yeah, I remember the resolution.
So despite everything else we've discussed, I mean, I think we're just long overdue for to do it, right? To have this position created. That said, I guess my trepidation is if it goes back to the board, they don't have a meeting until August, and we're looking at August before.
I don't know that I'm suggesting that we wait. What I'm saying is when we recruit,
Oh.
Right now the job description says safety and risk coordinator.
Right.
When we recruit, I think that's the title we should use because that's what's on the job description. That's what I'm asking about.
If I may, the suggestions are correct. It is more, again, just about organizational clarity for later down the road.
Mhm.
Recruiting under this title, like Executive Director Castillo, I don't believe will be a problem because there are risk managers that are actually specific to education on the physical side of things as well. I actually hold that certification myself. So, and I've never done workers' comp, nor do I want to. So, looking for this as a safety and risk manager, I don't think it's problematic. The desire to correct it, and we can go back to the board at some future date later, is just really more about organizational clarity.
Okay, fair enough.
I can work with Executive Director Calise on timeline. So we could start recruiting now with this title. And possibly if we make an offer, say this is the title of the position.
Or this is where we think it's going to head.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
if you're lucky
We can
enough
always-
to get someone before board meetings.
Okay,
start.
yeah, we can do that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
can do that.
I think just to keep us
Yeah, I guess
consistent.
my comment, well, first I wanted to be sure, and is that consistent, Executive Director Calise, with what you were telling us was your preferred approach? And that is having us adopt this job description as written with the word risk management in it, and recruiting with that word in it, and then at some future date, the board would just change
They
the
may
title.
choose to change that for clarity. Yes.
And that is your recommendation to do it that way.
Absolutely.
And that's not going to cause confusion.
No, I don't believe so.
Otherwise I've been rereading
Right.
these, both the duties and the minimum qualifications with your comments in mind. And, I sort of have to say, when I do read, especially the duties, there's a substantial risk management component to those duties. And you've explained, what it's not risk management in the sense of, workers' compensation and that sort of thing, but there is a risk management aspect to it having to do with, I don't know, fire safety or other kinds of safety. But importantly, there's, I think, enough reference in this, because I keep going back to the idea of school shootings and things like that. And this is the individual who's going to be the primary coordinator for issues having to do with that I think there's enough references to safety in these duties that I'm sort of satisfied with it. Do you feel that way too?
I do.
Okay. I had, this is would have been a comment. I thought about it for the prior one as well. And it's more our process. In both of these, Executive Director Castillo, you've indicated that you surveyed other school districts and et cetera, and are satisfied that this range is, within the established ranges. So I served, as you know, for many, many years on the city of Berkeley's personnel board, and we received job descriptions such as this, every meeting. And in those, the personnel director actually did include the survey of the other, what, and whether this range fell in the median of that survey, or was it an outlier? Was it lesser? And I don't know, Heidi, Chairperson Goldstein, what your thoughts are, but maybe going forward, it might be helpful to have the actual, if you've done the survey anyway, it seems like it might not be so difficult to include the results of that.
I have no problem including it moving forward. Yeah.
And
that's fine.
I would say, if you look back, I think when Patty Duell was chairing, or, was, supporting the commission and was in your role, she would provide two bits of information. One would be the peer survey, and the other would be sort of the internal reconciliation.
Right.
What are the peer titles here at BUSD,
Right.
that match to this, which Secretary provided us with, in terms of, sustainability coordinator, for example, for this one, so it sort of gives me an idea, just because I remember sustainability discussion. But yeah, that would be helpful to see. Thank
That's
you.
very
It's a
easy
good
to
idea.
do.
Okay.
All I would be doing is presenting what I've already written down in a more formal format. So yeah, that's fine. I can do that.
Okay.
Great.
So I don't have anything else.
Any other comments from anyone else on this role?
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
Mark Griffin, I'm the school safety officer, and I'm not in agreeing what he has out there. Because again, at the end of the day, we have issues like he talked about, there's gun shootings and everything else. You're gonna bring somebody in over us that doesn't know nothing about our campuses. Again, I know you guys are gonna recruit really well, but at the time you have people that are within who've been working, and I actually have a kid myself that's at Berkeley. I've got 3 that already graduated. So this is my last year with my kid. I do feel that Berkeley High is unsafe, but I know it's safe when I'm there. So because I know I take consideration of all the kids that I have. So I've been in these meetings, these safety committee meetings. They don't look at safety the way we do. So you're going to bring somebody on the outside who does not look at the way we do. Because if you're going to let an administrator who actually is going to make a determination of a child who makes a decision of doing something criminal and bring them back within hours of a suspension, without any kind of, I would say, discipline that equate the reason for what he's done, he or she did it for, then I think that we're really looking at this at a wrong eye, and I'm here to display that as a parent as well as an employee. So I'm hearing this on the Zoom. I drove over here because I want to let you know face to face that I don't agree with what I see, because I'm a person that's been there 30 years. And I don't, if I feel unsafe as a person that's an employee, I know my kids feel unsafe, then I think we all got to look at it at a concept to try to work on that. We have to work on safety for our children. We have a 360 that Jocelyn and Ms. Shanowski has come to different campuses. We're trying to get safety. We want to get safety for our children. I'm here for that, because that's what I came here, because this is going out of hand. So that's what I came here.
Would you mind, Mr. Griffin, just telling our commissioners your job title and how long you've been here?
I'm a school safety officer of 30 years. I've been doing the same job, and again, I've been working with children at Berkeley High School. So I know for a fact that those kids and parents who reach out to me, who say they think that they feel that they're safe when I'm there, but then they see the changes. I have 6 generations of kids. Now I'm at BAM and I'm seeing some of my kids, you know, so, and they're, you ain't retired yet? No, I haven't retired yet, because I still feel like there's something I can do here. And right now, I'm speaking up. I haven't been speaking up, but I will speak up about it now. And I'll be in any meeting that has to be, because this right now, it's just unequivocally wrong. It's wrong. I'm tired of seeing kids not getting taught how to be model citizens going into school. I mean, go out into this world. They come in as seeds, and we're supposed to raise them up to grow up to be able to be model citizens. We're not doing that. So, and that goes from administrating, where you patent up books. You know, we don't patent, we work with the situation. Everybody makes mistakes. So let's work with that. We need to be able to do that, because that's what I don't see. So, and clearly, like I said, at this point, I'm speaking about a lot of things I've seen, and I'm just tired of holding it back, not saying anything. So that's why I came in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you for
Mr.
driving
Thank
here
you for your,
to
Thank you.
share this.
I think Mr. Calise was signaling that he'd like to.
Would you like to speak again, Mr. Calise?
I want to clarify that, because I was trying to follow what Mr. Griffin was talking about. So this position is not over the SSOs. This position, right, does not manage the SSOs, doesn't tell them how to do their jobs, doesn't tell the administrators how to do their jobs. Again, when it comes to that level of student safety, right, there's the student services component. This position is really designed to work with the administration, to work with my office, to work with different offices within the district to improve safety, whether it be through additional staffing, recommended behavioral changes, or engineering controls. Now, this position could also serve in the sense of that if SSOs have concerns, such as what Mr. Griffin has talked about today, and maybe they feel as if, and I don't know if this is the case, but maybe as if they feel as if their concerns aren't being heard by their site administrator, this is actually another degree of advocacy. So I want to be really clear, because what I did hear Mr. Griffin talk about was someone coming in out of the blue to be over them, to tell them how to do that. That's not the intent. It's not the intent. It's not in the job description or anything else. It's really to help improve the overall safety and security of all of our schools, to mitigate the risk.
I would say, thank you.
Thank you.
For clarifying. Do you mind repeating, you had talked about this role, there's sort of like 3 big dimensions that this role acts in. It sounds like one is safety, one is, I think you called it behavioral controls.
So there's,
And what was the
yeah,
third?
so there's advocacy for additional staffing when needed,
Mhm.
right? So we would call that human capital. We would also refer to behavioral changes. And then we would talk about engineering controls. And engineering
Thank you.
controls is where it goes to my office. That's where it's, do you need more fences and gates? Do you need access control?
Mhm.
What is it that you need that from an engineering perspective, we can actually help with? Because a lot of what I think Mr. Griffin works with, and assuming, right? But I know that a lot of the challenges that our SSOs deal with, those aren't necessarily dealt with through the engineering controls. Right. A lot of what our SSOs work with is dealing with the day-to-day, what happens on the campus. Now, of course, there is a large component, though, of their job to make sure to keep that campus safe, right? To keep people from wandering in. That's where the engineering controls come in play.
What I think is also interesting, and, appreciate Mr. Griffin's comments on this, is I heard, and now I understand better, the concern, you sort of mentioned suspensions, 2-hour suspensions or something like
Right.
that. And I understand that's Dr. Shelley's office.
Correct.
Right. So now I understand more about what you mean about behavioral controls and why it's part of it. And I think also, I'm not sure, Mr. Griffin, if you were in the room when I asked the question about a district-wide safety committee, which apparently is a new committee. It sounds to me like you have a lot of ideas and thoughts, 30 years worth of how things have rolled here at BUSD. And, you know, it sounds like maybe someone who should come in front of the committee or be on the committee.
Yeah, and Mr. Griffin serves on the BCCE Safety Committee now, which is helpful. But like I said, it's the idea of the district-wide committee is to make sure that the ideas, the thoughts, and the concerns of the individual school communities, the BCCE committee, the BFT committee, all of those coalescing come together.
Right.
So that it is very clear what the direction needs to take from this position. Will this position replace our SSOs? Absolutely not. Will this position eliminate the need or tell them what to do? Neither to both, right? There's still student services, which absolutely has an appropriate role in the school district. It's not something that this position would do. This is, it gets a little bit convoluted because the term safety is such a catch-all, right? It all deals with the same thing. It's about keeping students and staff safe, what Mr. Griffin does every day. But there's also a lot of other components to safety that actually afford him the opportunity to do his job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A last comment I'll make, and then if you'd like to come back up, please do. Procedurally, our board has approved this position, and our purview here is a small part of this that Commissioner Roeder talked about earlier with respect to approving minimum quals. You know, in some respects, BUSD has committed to this position, and our part of this is the minimum qualifications and the compensation. There's nothing in our scope of authority that would interrupt the fact that the district has already approved this position, just so you're clear procedurally on what we do versus what the board does.
Speaking on that behalf, again, I've been on all these safety committees that they talk about. So again, at the end of the day, this was a direction of Shaheen Muhammad. She actually wanted to do this and make this, she actually asked my opinion. So when we actually draw this up, it just fell into his lap. So I don't know exactly what it is that the decision of making this a position. I got that. But I don't, again, at the end of the day, it was supposed to be over. She needed help with this, what she had going up on the campus, because she does not know safety. So she needed my help. So we came up with this, and this also has been a position that was already done by Mr. Wiggins. Barry Wiggins was the safety coordinator years ago. He was our supervisor. So he came in, and I don't know how Mr. Police is the one, how this direction of this new job title, how it fell in his lap. I don't know. That's not my pay grade. But my pay grade is what I'm saying is what I'm seeing over and over is that you bring somebody over the top to put them in this position that don't know nothing about our school. They talk about going and bringing in people from another place, people who have been here working at Berkeley Unified for the years of time. You got experience. Sit down with some of us so that we can make it where we can make it work for you. Because again, I grew up right down the street. So I'm saying to you that these things need to be for our community. And what's not happening is everything that's been put out, our community is not being taken care of. I know the kids that I'm talking about, which is my own, I have to do everything to make sure her plan is right, and there's other parents that do the same. So I'm looking at safety. I'm concerned about that, but because we needed two safety officers, that's what they were saying in the parent committees. I was in that safety committee with the parents, and that was, they went from this large number, now you came down to two. So we don't want to lose someone to be able to help 3,500 kids to this one position either. We don't want to do that as as BCCE, as well as those are school safety officers. We don't want to lose that. We want to make sure that we are be able to maintain 17.5 acres of land. That's what we have with 3,500 kids. And that's important because we don't know what can happen. I'm working at BAM right now, and a teacher said, well, what are you here for? I'm like, well, for safety. And she goes, we're safe. No, you don't know. You're looking at the front page of somebody. You don't know what actually can happen with that person. You don't never know what
Right.
comes in. So that's why I'm saying that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Linda Lee has her hand up.
So,
I don't. See
oh, I don't even see.
Yeah, I don't see.
Is Glenda Lee, I'm told you're in the Zoom room.
Oh, yes, just real quick, and like John said, I serve in the safety and BCC safety committee. And Mark, there's two different positions that I think Mark has in mind, and they're getting confused. This position is the one that we've been talking about in the safety committee with this specific job description that John put forward. And the position, like Commissioner Heidi said, is already approved. This is just a job description. What you talked about, the position at the high school regarding the safety officers and Shaheen, that's a completely different position that's still in its conception. It hasn't been approved, and there's still talks about that. So I think because they both say safety, and that has been the word that been talking, I think they're getting confused, but this position that John put forward is the one that we've been talking about in the safety committee, that the safety committee has been pressuring us to get it posted and do it quick, because we need someone to deal with all the safety concerns in the district in regards to facilities and what it says in the job description. I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. A last comment I'll make, which is this has been really instructive. And one place where I think some of these perspectives can be helpful is when the commission devises its written and oral exams. You know, these are important elements, and I think we've heard them and we understand, I think, some of the nuance here. So we can incorporate them.
Yeah, I want to thank Mr. Griffin for coming forward and all of his years of service for the district, and as a parent, it's really helpful and important. I think one of the things that crossed my mind when he was speaking is I think here in Berkeley, we sometimes have a tendency to think we live in a bubble, that somehow we're immune from all of the horrendous devastation that occurs or has occurred in other cities and other school districts. We don't live in a bubble, at least that's my opinion. We don't live in a bubble. We're not immune from everything. So I really respect what our school safety officers do every day at our schools. And I think, I think we've been trying to recruit more and more safety officers, and I think we should redouble those efforts. And the fact that our safety officers like Mr. Griffin serve on these safety committees is incredibly important. You put in your time to give advice to the district and to principals and to parents. That's really important. I guess what I don't exactly see, and maybe this is partly what Glenda Lee was saying, which is I don't see this coordinator position as contradicting anything that Mr. Griffin was pointing out. All of the things that Mr. Griffin was pointing out are absolutely critical for our district. And in fact, I sort of see this coordinator position as potentially anyway, being someone that, whether it's Mr. Griffin or whether it's a safety committee or others, could come to help them do their jobs better and help them get the resources that they need to do their jobs. Maybe it's locks, maybe it's gates, maybe it's, additional personnel, whatever it might be. And that safety coordinator, I think, could have the ear of others in the district, Dr. Shelley and others, who might help with all of these safety concerns. So I guess I don't see it as contradictory. I see it as more as complementary potentially. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We've had a really robust discussion on this, so I think probably we should vote and, finish our agenda.
I would move for the adoption of the as written, the safety and risk coordinator as presented by our executive director.
And I second.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can we take about a 5-minute break?
Do people need a break? Should we do that? Take a 5-minute break? Yes. Okay, so we'll come back. Study phase 1 findings. And what I will do here is ask Secretary Castillo briefly to speak to it, and then I'll open it to the floor because I know there are several folks who would like to speak, some of whom have time constraints.
I don't have a lot to say. I think the information speaks for itself. I just want to make sure structurally that there's a steering committee. There is the JCQ that the employee fills out. There's the interview, and then there's an interview with the supervisor, and all of that culminates into this report. I have my own questions about the report because it's the first time I've seen it as well. And, I wasn't as involved in every single position. So I definitely want to open it for feedback. And again, just for those that are going to speak, this is a collaborative process. The commission is going to hear feedback from the union, from our employees, and, recommendations are based on the information that we're getting. This report represents one aspect of that. So your opinions are very, very important for the commissioners to hear. So anyway, that's it.
Thank you. Short and sweet.
Procedural questions or a process question. So a lot of what's in fact, most of what's in this report, I think, has to do with things such as job descriptions, duties, and things like that. And I mentioned this at the last meeting too. I think, normally it's not the function of the Personnel Commission to go through the duties of the position.
Right.
That's the job of the superintendent, the district, and of the Board of Education ultimately. But it strikes me, and correct me if I'm wrong, it strikes me that it's quite possible that, I have some questions about the duties, the description on a couple of, not very many, but a couple. Perhaps BCCE will have, or Local 21, well, later, Local 21 might have some questions about it, and individual employees may have questions or comments about their jobs. I don't personally feel that that's inappropriate for our commission to listen to. And I also don't think that it's inappropriate if we see something that we believe, like, let's say something is pointed out to us by BCCE or employees or the public that doesn't look right. I don't think there's anything wrong with us saying so to the Board of, it's going to be ultimately up to the Board of Education.
Right.
But, and then, perhaps if everybody agrees, even before it gets to the Board of Education, a revision can be made to those if not necessarily a mistake, but just a misunderstanding or something, some clarification needs to be made. So as a process question, do the executive director and my co-commissioner agree that is within our purview at this point?
I believe so. I see my role as a facilitator for this. I think that even though we as a body are not deciding the job essential functions. I do think it's important for us to make sure that when feedback is shared with us, that we make sure to capture it. And I think just a general knowledge of making sure that what has been shared is captured, or some version of that is captured, is important for us moving forward. At some point, you know, we are going to get to the education compensation pieces and getting into the nitty gritty of that. So I think this is going to inform all of our decision making later, the things that we are responsible for. But in the meantime, I think it's informative, and I think our responsibility is what you just mentioned, Commissioner Roeder, which is they're sharing information with us. We then have opinions and then share it in the report as well. I do think that that's part of our responsibility. That doesn't mean we're deciding the essential functions, but we are capturing them according to our feedback. That's how I see it.
I think what I'd say, you know, in supporting that also is hosting probably isn't the right word, but it's the only one I can think of right now. We're hosting this process.
Yeah.
And we understand a lot about how the district works. And so do other stakeholders, you know, who are participating in this process. And the whole point of sort of mid-process reports and reviews is to make sure, you know, that we're not going off the rails, you know, in some way, shape, or form. And there are so many ways, you know, things can go off the rails. A little later, I'll run through a little analysis about participation, which I found useful in helping me understand something that was a little different than the way it's been represented previously. So I think it's totally appropriate.
Good. Thank you. Thank you.
So with that, if you are interested in speaking, there are a few enough people here. Just determine amongst yourselves who goes first, next, and next.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have had the opportunity to look through, this is a really long attachment of looking at the job descriptions and things like that. And what, you know, the majority of us on the executive board are sorry that Yazid had to leave because there were some things that he wanted to say regarding the bus drivers and the mechanics there at transportation and so forth. But us having the opportunity to look through this, we have many concerns just with phase one. So what I want to say, and then Ms. Margarita is going to come in and just give you an example of what's really important on why we're asking that. And we're glad that your facilitator, Commissioner Castillo, is that because we really need to slow this down. And I know you've heard me say it before, and I know that the consultant said that it would be very ambitious to have this completed by November. And then in speaking with Pauline, I think that she would be willing to relook at the contract and see, you know, that we could push it back some. We want to make sure that we're not coming back with many reclasses, right?
Yeah.
And we want to make sure that we're giving every BCCE employee, our members, an opportunity to really take part in this process.
Yeah.
How often do you get a chance to have the class and comp study, and just to make sure that it was fair? So I'm going to let Margarita explain to you some things that we all been talking about. And she had a good meeting with Frank and myself and Steve to you know, regarding the concerns that she found in this process. Go ahead.
My name is Margarita Johnson. I work at King Middle School as.
Would you mind going moving to the mic?
I work at King Middle School
Hmm.
as a special education IA2. I also work in the after-school program as an IT. I've been with the district for 23 years.
Okay.
I did the survey that was presented to us, and I also participated in the, I was interviewed as well. I want to say that I felt during the interview that I was listened to and I was heard. It was a very positive experience. When the initial draft came out of our job description, I read it very carefully, and I thought it was pretty well nailed, and I felt comfortable with it.
Okay.
2 days ago, when the notification that there was a meeting today and that you're going to be going over it, I thought, I don't really need to do anything here. I read it and I'm comfortable. But I did decide to read it. And on the first page of the special education, IA2, I saw a word inserted that had not been in the original draft that I read on May the 4th. And that simple word just kind of got to me. And
I don't mean to interrupt you. I just want, can you point us to the page if you have it with you?
yeah, it's the very first page of the attachment F. It would be page 179.
Okay.
So under this distinguishing characteristics, it's towards the bottom. And it reads identical to the draft that was written on May the 4th. However, the sentence that reads, and I won't say all of it, I'll just jump in. Behavior modifications to students classified with mild to moderate or moderate to severe learning and or, here's the word, non-severe emotional disabilities. The original draft did not have the word non-severe.
Okay.
In the 23 years that I've worked as an IA, I have worked many, many times with students who have severe emotional disabilities. This past year, I worked very closely with 2 students with that diagnosis. So I was concerned. I questioned why. Why would a word be inserted into this that hadn't been there to begin with? So I started to do a dive that I thought might help answer questions. And what I did was, because I know the BIS position does work with students who have severe emotional disabilities. So I pulled up theirs. Mildred very kindly printed them for me so I could do it absolute side by side, highlight, etc. Oh. And what I found is really almost everything that the BIS does, the IA2 does as well, but it may not be listed in our job description. Ooh, I then looked at the pay discrepancy between the 2 jobs, and it's significant. A BIS gets paid $700 more a month than a IA2. And so I found, having now looked at both of them, instead of feeling pretty good about the initial draft, it's completely kind of blown that open for me. And I feel that this needs to be looked at so carefully. I think it's messy. And I think it really requires a lot of heads coming together to make this right. I absolutely love my job. And I feel very, very strongly about it. And I would love to see more people come into the job because I think it is such a great job. And so I think if we can get some really, really good clarification around this and what exactly we do and what exactly we don't do, and a pay that is matches all the skills that are required to do our job, I think we might be able to start recruiting more people and really qualified and good people to do this great job. So I am asking, as Mildred stated, please slow this process down. It's going to take a while.
Can I ask a question?
Can I say something in
Sure.
in
ahead.
addition to what Margarita was saying? So in speaking and seeing the discrepancy that she had, it gave us the opportunity to look at other job descriptions. So there are other ones that we directly looked at, like I looked at the whole administration pool, the school admins, 1, 2, 3, the clericals, just finding the discrepancies. And then I'm asking some people to send me what they received May 4th and signed off on saying whether they agreed to their job description compared to what was being brought to you today. And there were some discrepancies there as well. And then there were changes in words, and we all know that small words can mean a lot, right?
Yeah.
So it's getting with the exec board and speaking to Steve, who's the negotiations chair, and the other exec board members. We are hoping, and if you again will think, really consider slowing this down, is that the exec board and the negotiations team, we're really going to have like a work day, but we're going to talk more about it in the summer to get with the members, because we haven't had the opportunity to really meet with our members to even talk about phase 1. And we're already going into phase 2, but there have questions. And then, you know, we're dealing with some people that may have concerns of the process in itself. But we really need to meet with the members, have a work day where they're able to come in with their job description. Let's go over the job description. The whole IA pool in itself, there is many questions because there's the IA SPED ECE that we just saw, IA SPED ECE 2. And that one, when you look at the IA SPED 2, so the IA early childhood education, when you look at the education and experience, it says that you have to have 6 units of college level coursework in childhood education. So it's very clear what the state says that you must have in order to work at an ECE. But then when you look at the IA 2 special education, it doesn't say that, but they just put an IA SPED 2 at King. So if you don't have the proper units, like if you're going to have that, it needs to say instructional assistant 2 special education ECE, right? And then in that job description, it needs to make sure that it states the units that you must have and, you know, the other things that the state says that you must have. So and we know the IA pool in itself is large. So we need to really look at it just to make sure that we're not coming back later, because y'all, I'm gonna keep repeating, because Charlie was very clear when he said, I'm not gonna do reclasses. So there are job descriptions, and then there are 6, I think, if I'm correct, Sarah, that of people that you didn't get responses from at all in phase 1, job descriptions.
JCQ, but they did participate, some did participate.
Okay, I appreciate that. But we want to talk to those groups and have the opportunity to really push people to participate. But it's going to take a lot of us. And then, as it was stated earlier, with this being the summer, it's really hard. People are taking vacation. It's the summer. We're not going to get much done as we would if it was the school year. So we're going to need, you know, the time also in the fall to work with people and work with members, to work with members in phase 1. And so if you have any questions for us.
I was just going to ask just a couple questions
Sure.
of Margarita, but Mildred, thank you. Thank you. It's a really important point. I appreciate it. I might have questions for Mildred too, but so if we were, well, let me put the slow down question over here for now, because I want to talk to the commissioners about it. But do you feel that there was a disconnect between your interview and what was ultimately on the job, the job you read?
I did not initially feel that way until I started reading the BIS description and saw that there were things in theirs that were not in ours that I perform on a daily basis.
I think that this whole process is meant to capture things in that you do that are not in your job description. I think that's the disconnect I'm having, why it wasn't included.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so things that I sort of took for granted, well, of course, that's my job, that's what I do. Then I didn't see that it was omitted from ours until I saw it actually spelled out in the other job description. And I said, oh, but I do this as well.
I appreciate you coming and telling us that. This whole process is actually meant to capture what you're doing that is not in the job description. So the disconnect I'm having, and this isn't going to be solved in this moment, but the disconnect I'm having is, why is it that what you shared was not put in the job description? I guess we'll have to look into that.
Yeah.
You may not have the answer. I'm speaking out loud, obviously,
Yeah,
but
but I mean, I kind of asked myself the same question because I read the draft and I felt comfortable with
Yeah.
it. So there was something too in just this additional information that I read in the BIS.
Yeah.
That the light bulb started going, oh, but wait, yeah, no, I do this. I do this sometimes daily, or I have done this. Yeah.
I will, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I will say to the commission that I know that it's been brought to my attention that there are a lot of issues with the BIS IA, description, what they're doing, responsibilities. It's been brought up multiple times to me. So I'm hoping that through this process, we can kind of get some resolution about it. It may come down to effects bargaining. I don't know, but there definitely is a disconnect between the district's interpretation of what the BIS does and the IA does. And I've noticed it as well. There is that pay discrepancy.
Could I make a comment? And thank you, Margarita, for coming and presenting this. I've been involved, not in exactly studies of this sort, but other kinds of studies where there's sometimes this sort of stovepiping that occurs so that you provide your information about your job. And I think, and I appreciate your comments on the good side of the ledger, at least there's something on the good side, that you felt listened to, and you felt that what you had to say was reflected, at least in that first draft for sure. And we need to get to the bottom of the change in wording, but so you were comfortable with that. And I don't know if it's a fact or not, but it's quite possible that the BIS, whoever was kind of representing or talking about their jobs, was also comfortable with their jobs. But of course, one of the things that appears in most, if not all, of the job descriptions are the distinguishing characteristics. And distinguishing characteristics, that's part of the job description. And so if the distinguishing characteristic of the BIS is not distinguishing, then it's not a distinguishing characteristic. But unfortunately, with this, what I perceive as potential stovepiping is they're listening to you, writing it down, and it's correct. They're listening to them, writing it down, and it's correct. But there isn't a process necessarily that kind of bridges those different positions, and that's necessary. And I think to Mildred's point, I'm now pretty convinced, I can be convinced otherwise, but I'm pretty convinced that this process does need to be slowed down, and that additional time, because clearly each of these job descriptions, and some of them are going to be more complicated than others, they're not all the same, but these job descriptions, each one of them is a big task to get right. And it's sort of, what's the point of having gone through this and spending all the money that the district is spending on it, as well as all the time, if we don't at least do our best? Are we going to be perfect? I sort of doubt it, but at least try to do our best, and then we have these budgeting constraints, and I hate those things. And we have to figure out how to get around them and all of that. So yeah, those are my comments.
Part of me,
Initial.
I really appreciate your observation of this, but I do say that when I read that word non-severe, I thought, oh, is this the attempt to make the distinguishing characteristics? Was that part of it? But I don't know. I don't know what was in the mind of the person who did that. But I questioned whether that was part of it. Let's distinguish these two And I thought, well, gee, that's silly because I work with students with severe,
Severe.
yes, emotional disabilities all the time.
Something I think is true here, and I'm happy to get this feedback of these examples. You know, we kind of brought a bunch of stuff through the chute. And it doesn't surprise me in the least that there will be discrepancies. You know, I completely expect discrepancies. And my thought about how we address this is our first stop is with EHA. To understand, you know, for starters, their process when they amalgamate information. So what I think I heard from you, for example, is you reviewed on May 4th your, you know, updated job description and something changed. And my first question is to understand, you know, how did that happen? And, you know, why did that happen? You know, was it an edit? You know, it could be anything from an error to a late change based on somebody else's job description. You know, I have no idea why, but, you know, these kinds of things help us to understand, you know, what happened here. This question 2 is obviously the insertion of non-severe. You know, is this meant to be a different distinguishing characteristic, you know, based on your experience, which is you do work with people who are severe. And probably my biggest question is within the way our contract is structured, you know, it's not going to be a surprise to them. There are discrepancies and that there is overlap and that there are certain families that probably are going to need a second view, you know, to understand. And, you know, these are big job families, you know, the IA and the BIS families. So, you know, a question I have is, you know, how do we reconcile things like that when we see them? Because none of this right now is anything that has been adopted. This is, you know, sort of the raw information that we take and that we work with that will go to the board as recommendations. And, you know, I can totally see, you know, even before we started this, you know, that one recommendation is, because we've known this, IA1, IA2, BIS, you know, do we have too many job descriptions? You know, should this, you know, what will the recommendation be about how, you know, we reconcile to this? And, you know, we're a ways away from that. But I think the first question is with respect to the integrity of the documents and the expectations. I want to understand if you signed off on something and then saw something different in here, why is that? That's question 1. I think question 2, something that Mildred brought up, which is the degree of participation. If you're able to hang around after you all speak, the raw data that Sarah put together, and do we have handouts that folks can look at? We asked at an earlier meeting to try to understand what the counts were, you know, who participated in, you know, what part of this. And Sarah very kindly put together something super useful. And her part is the blue headers. These are the raw counts for, you know, all of our job classes in phase 1.
Time out for 1 second. Our copies don't have colors.
Oh, okay. So there's the last 4 columns are columns I added. Okay, maybe that's a better way to understand it. You know, so the work Sarah did was she just took the raw numbers, you know, how many people do we have in each job class? How many completed, you know, the JCQ, did an interview, did an employee input form, and then she did the same for supervisors relative to that job class. You know, broadly speaking, so if you look at clerical and admin, which in the color version is highlighted. Is that something we can bring it up on the screen? You can look at the screen maybe and see that it's, you know, it's a very light pale yellow highlight. I should have done it darker. You know, this and the analysis to the right, you know, the percent of people who participated in the JCQ or the interview or the form. If you just look at it for clerical and admin, you see some participation percentages that are actually much larger than EHA reported to us on May 31st. And I want to talk to them about that and understand, why is that? What I think is also useful in an analysis like this is comparing what the participation is for the employees as compared to the supervisors. So the very last column under the orange is the cumulative supervisor percent participation, because supervisors could do an interview or an input form. Something I don't have in this data is actually unique participants. Did one supervisor do both things? Did one employee do all three things? So there's another level of understanding. But again, if you look at clerical admin, just, for the heck of it, and say, let's just take the highest percent participation in any one category, right? So it would be for the JCQs, 51% and change, right? So that is sort of more in line with what EHA said they normally experience, right? When I look at the cumulative supervisor participation, it seems relatively balanced to, the level of employee participation, but again, I don't know if the supervisors did both, so, if that number sort of overly represents. But what I think is important to our determining, do we need to slow down or do we need to put extra effort somewhere? My hope was in doing this analysis, and you'll see it breaks down by each individual line, so we can know for, school admin assistant, ECE, what did they look like compared to school administrative assistant 3, what did they look like? We can get that surgical in looking at this. I think this is going to be helpful to you as the union when you're trying to figure out who you want to participate. And I think to the district, the question we're going to face is maybe there is some latitude to extend the contract. I don't know how much latitude, and I don't know how long, and I don't know what it would cost. But what I do know is the better we can set a very precise expectation, and I'm making this up. We want to extend the contract by 3 months. And the reason we want to do it is we have to double back to this, that, and the other job classes in phase 1 because, they didn't show up for the survey. That's a reason backed by data, that might have a chance, right? And we will need that level of surgical data to have that discussion, which is why I did this analysis. What I would recommend is, I think this is a document we can share. I think it helps to look at it in color because you can see the categories, summarized by colorful lines, so it is helpful to understand that. But just as another example, operations, which is Frank's, I don't know, Frank, actually, you're not in operations. Operations is just custodians, right? All right. This is somebody else. Operations did not show up, right? Purchasing did not show up, right? So there are some very clear places where if you only have, and, it may not be 3 months, it may be 3 weeks. If you only have 3 weeks to go after somebody, something like this is going to help you understand who to go after. So thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
The only question I have, and Sarah, I don't know how hard this is to do. I am still interested in unique participants.
Well, I did have some unique participants down there at the bottom, unique participants on the JCQ interview.
Oh, sure enough.
Input form. It was
Okay.
sort of hiding underneath there, but this is just for employees, not for supervisors as well.
Right. And it's sort of aggregated.
Yeah.
So we may have to think a little more about
Right.
how we want to handle that. I'll point out one example, where we understand supervisor over participation. If you go almost down to the bottom of the first page under child nutrition services, what you see in the summary bar is the cumulative supervisor participation is 163%. So this tells us supervisors, at least some of them, certainly did both the interview and the input form. So for us to, if we care about, is it balanced, supervisor participation and employee participation, we might look at that. You might not even care about that. You just might want employee participation at 50% or better for any category, and that might be sufficient. But if we are going to ask for more time, it needs to be based on something that is real information.
I really appreciate this so much, sharing this with us. Like, this is definitely going to help us for our executive board meeting that we're having on Monday to talk more about the class and comp study. Majority of us here have been present in past class and comp studies. And we were talking about it because we really want this to be effective. We really don't want to hear the mumbles and the grumbles and, it didn't do, we don't want to do that. So we're hoping that if we can really make sure that the employees are heard, whatever that looks like, if that's them working with us, have an opportunity to work with us, have an opportunity to go over their job description, because it's a lot to really, that's why I'm saying it's going to take all of us. The exec board, it's going to take the negotiations team to really come together as a union to really be available to all these employees, because the phase one is our largest unit, right? And so that's, the majority of our classifications. And we just really want to make sure that we just don't move too fast and to where they didn't get a chance to really be heard.
Right. And I think there's nothing more compelling than being able to go to a unit, like operations and say, you guys showed up 7%.
Right.
And, your supervisor showed up 33%. Who's going to influence the outcome? Your supervisors, because they participated more. And, I totally support trying to figure out a way to say, guys, we got a week, one more time,
Right.
Either show up and put up, and, or don't, but, the process won't stop because you didn't participate.
Right.
Can I ask a question? And I think this maybe is something that the executive board should consider and it's a question. And that is the problem that exists, and it may be two problems, but is the problem that exists the one Heidi is pointing out, which is there are some classifications, some units, some classifications that haven't sufficiently participated. And therefore the data, the information is not accurate because not enough people participated. I think that's kind of Heidi's point as a possibility in certain line items.
I would say it's not that it's not accurate, but it's going to be weighted to who participated.
Weighted, right, which makes it inaccurate. But that's right. Yeah, I agree. Or is the problem, as I see it, kind of more like the problem Marguerite pointed out, which is there are enough employees who probably did participate and the raw information is there. The problem is that the job descriptions as presented aren't sufficiently coordinated so that, distinguishing characteristics and things like that aren't reflected in those job descriptions. In other words, the question is, when we're talking about opening up the contract and extending it, are we going to be going back to certain groups of employees and saying, there's another bite of the apple here. You need to fill out the job questionnaire and, for your position so that we can do this accurately? Or is it, we've got enough information, now we need to look at the job descriptions to see if they're accurate or not? And it could be both of those things. And you don't need to, if you have comments about it, that would be great. But if it's something you might be interested in bringing back, to your executive board and asking that question, if we're going to extend the contract, what are we extending it for? What are we going to be doing during this extended period? What I'm hearing from Marguerite is what we have to be doing is doing a deep dive into the actual job descriptions themselves.
So can I give you just to answer what you just said? So Frank had brought up a good point when we were talking about coming together with the members. So like just for example, we're talking about having like a couple of work days. It's going to take probably about a week, I would think, because it's so many classifications that we have to go through, where the negotiations team and the exec board is available for, we're going to go through literally through each classification, each job description, and meet with them, go through them, so we can make sure that everybody is having an opportunity to sit and speak with somebody that they trust, that's listening to what their concerns are, making any notes that we have, so then we can take, or I, or whom, probably going to be me, bringing it back to the steering committee or to the table, however the next phase would be. But we need the time to do that. So slowing it down will actually give us the time that we need to work with the members. And this helps a lot. I don't think that looking at this, we may not need everybody, but even just looking at this, I know, I'm just saying, for example, Steve, who's our negotiation chair, can really, and he's also a custodian too, can really meet with the custodians. And then we know that Mark has this huge interest in, you know, he's going to deal with the safety officers and he's going to meet with them. And then the other, there's large pools, but we will benefit from, and the members will benefit from, is really having an opportunity to meet with their union and talking to them.
Yeah, so the only comment, Heidi, that I would make, listening to what Mildred says, is maybe when assuming we extend the contract some, maybe we don't need to have Eric Hall come back and do more questionnaires with more employees and all of that stuff. Maybe that's not, because that's going to be an expense item for them to come back and do more. Maybe we don't need that.
Yeah, right. No, I'm not sure where we want to take it.
Unless we can help them fill out their, you know, because some people will need help and some people are embarrassed to say that they need help. So we might be able to even help them fill out their questionnaires as well.
And I might offer just a short-term solution, which is we continue how we're going and have two paths working simultaneously. I mean, my team and I can work with Mildred and BCCE to try to tackle some of these issues, but I think we move forward with phase 2 and phase 3, and if we have to now create an extension, to Commissioner Roeder's point, we should start carving out things that need to be resolved and extend it that way. Because I think if we're going to go to our CBO, if we're going to go to Pauline, there needs to be a very definite start end. Because I think when EHA, in fairness to EHA, I was there for the proposals, when they first proposed this, they called it a 2-year project.
Right.
Mhm.
I can see it being really.
But that's what they said.
They said it was going to be pretty ambitious
Yeah.
to get it all done by November.
In fairness to them, that's what they said.
Right. I mean,
know,
if we can at least add on 3 more months,
Yeah.
seriously, I think to add 3 more months would definitely be workable. I just don't see it happening by November. It's just too much.
No, I think we all agree to that. I think there's another component here, which is to Commissioner Roeder's initial point, which is there's only so much we can do in terms of supervision and feedback in this stage, because there is going to be a stage where you're going to have to negotiate with the district.
Right.
Because you're going to hit what's called an impasse. And then it's effects bargaining. You're changing our job.
Can I say something to that? The fact that we still have to meet the cause and effect about their job descriptions. I'm not going to feel comfortable talking or even talking about compensation for a job description that we haven't had an opportunity to meet with that member about.
Right.
Because I actually think we're doing it backwards. I don't feel comfortable saying, yeah, we're looking at this job description. It looks really good. We're going to agree to it, but we have not talked about compensation. And then once we talk about compensation, and there could be things that's added or changed that really makes a difference in the way the work is done, but there's not going to be any compensation for it because we've already agreed to it. So I want to make sure that the members are heard. The main thing that what we need as BCCE is to make sure that our members are heard and have had the input. We're moving so fast towards phase 1. Again, that's our largest units that we really need to slow it down. And I don't see anything wrong with slowing it down because
no, I don't either.
That's less errors being made.
Here's what I might recommend just for your consideration.
Right.
I know. Here's what I might recommend just for your consideration. Let's plan to get Sam and Glenda Lee in this conversation.
Okay.
Everyone that's here, myself, Sam and Glenda Lee, and we have a meeting on very specific meeting on you carving out which job descriptions you've identified so that we can work on release time and we can work on you getting the time to meet with them so that you can do all that. And then I think we need to start the conversation on if the district's position is one thing and the union's position is another, then that does need to be put to our negotiation chair. These are the things that are going to have to be negotiated. But I think there's going to be other things that after further conversation, you're going to be like, oh, my bad, you're right. Or, there's going to be a lot of those, but you're right, Mildred, to your point, there has to be that engagement. So maybe can you maybe all discuss what that might look like? And on my end, I'll talk to Sam and Glendalee, and then you and I next week can maybe say, let's set up a time to meet. Because I think there needs to be a specific meeting about this and what the plan is moving forward for this before we go to Pauline.
Okay,
That's what I think.
okay.
You don't have to decide. now.
Will
Just
we
proposing that.
have
Yeah.
the similar info for phase two, right? Phase two ended on June 12th, right?
Correct.
You
Yeah.
know, week and a half ago or whatever.
Mhm.
Is there a similar analysis that we can do for phase two? You know, where we can figure out participation, you know,
I asked EHA today for that information. And I haven't received it yet for the JCQ. We haven't even started with the interview process yet.
all right, so we really, but you know, the JCQs, you know, when I look at just what your, you know, the unique data was from phase one, the JCQs seem to be the preponderance of the unique participants. It might at least just give us an idea of what's going on, because at least from the employee side, probably supervisor interviews haven't happened yet either. Right? Okay. Okay. You know, any data you can get that just, you know, helps us understand better what we might be asking for would be good.
Margarita has
Thank
to
you.
leave for her appointment, but she just wanted to say
Thank you for
Thank you.
coming.
Thank
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Sure.
That's why we're here. Thank you.
Okay, so it sounds like we have some follow-on stuff that will happen in early July. Is there any other discussion that folks want to have about class and comp? And specifically, Aaron and Sarah, I'm sort of wondering from your perspective, right? You've touched this in a different way.
I think slowing down would be great if it's possible, but I just don't know what's possible in terms of the budget. So I think we just need more people to participate, but we also do need the more time to do the proper analysis,
Mhm.
I would say.
All right, thank you. Aaron, go ahead.
I also think that we should slow down, but I do think that the data for phase two and phase three will look different. I think we are going to have more participation. And so if there's some way that we can revisit phase one while we're doing phase two or phase three, that would be great before we go into the salary study. If that could be a request to EHA, but after discussing, of course, with Pauline, what that would look like as far as how much time we could extend that contract.
Mhm. All right. I mean, I like the idea that, you know, we circle the wagons with the stakeholders
I'm gonna
early
do
on
that.
and
I'm
talk
gonna
through.
schedule that
Yeah.
and bring all this and try to.
Okay.
I think we can do this with parallel tracks. I don't think we need to stop this or accelerate this or commit to extending until we start addressing these.
And we may
then-
have some other thoughts about how
Correct.
to handle this. Right. I'm not surprised. This is exactly why you do, you know, a mid-course check-in, because
Absolutely.
stuff happens.
Absolutely.
right?
And all of this
So-
feedback is important. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So I want to understand what's going to happen.
Mhm.
So let's just take for an example. So as I understand it, BCCE is going to go to its members on a lot of these or some of these
Mhm.
job descriptions.
Yeah.
And let's just take the SPED 2 job description,
Yeah.
since it was discussed just now, comparing that to the BIS
Mhm.
job description. So let's say that Mildred or Frank or Jocelyn, after having discussed it with their members, and they look at the BIS job description, they look at the SPED 2 job description, and they can see, as Margarita said, that there are functions, tasks in the BIS that are performed by the SPED 2s.
Yep.
So they need to be incorporated. And so Mildred or Frank or whoever comes back and has, you know, let's just say like a revised job description or a suggested job description, or maybe just a list of duties or whatever it might be, then what? So they have that, they provide that to you,
Yes.
Charlie, I assume.
Yeah.
Who's going to be making let's say there's nothing incorrect about that, sure, these are functions that the sped twos are performing and they're not in the current job description. They need to be added.
Right.
So then what's going to happen? Will you be going back to Eric Hall and asking them to revise that draft job description, or will you take it upon yourself to revise that job description? How's it going to be accomplished?
Well, if we're referring to the BIS IA specifically, I think that this issue's come up more than once. So let me answer that in two ways. So just for BIS, I think that I need to get all of the feedback I can. This feedback is important, but get it from Mildred. And talk to Samantha and Glenda Lee. What's the district's position on this? If the district says this, we agree with this, and there's a disagreement, I think that that's beyond our purview. I think that's going to have to be bargained, because if we're talking about, we're taking the position that BIS and IA, again, I'm pretending I'm to speak for the district, but we take the position that BIS and IA, they should be doing those things. And Margarita's wrong. If that's the position they've taken, I think at that point, there's not a lot we can do, because that's a bargaining item. However,
can I stop you there for one
Sure,
second?
sure.
Somewhere along the line, I heard someone tell us that if there's a disagreement between what the employee states
Yeah.
is his or her job duties and what the supervisor states, that it was going to go to the steering committee. Someone said that, I think.
It does go to the steering committee, and I think these have gone to the steering committee, and that's why we had the steering committee review all of these. As
But
part
has
of
the
this.
steering committee reviewed, I mean, and it's hypothetical now, right? I mean, right now, we don't know, do we? That there's a disagreement between, I mean, is this the result of a disagreement between the district and the employees?
There is about BIS and the IA, for sure. I can't speak to the rest of them.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm bringing that one up as an
And so what
extreme
is the
example.
steering, I mean, if it went to the steering committee, what is the steering committee determined?
Well, we're going to meet with them.
Oh, okay,
We
they
haven't
haven't
met
looked
yet,
at, they haven't
but
looked
when
at
we
it yet.
meet, I'm sure there's going to be feedback from that meeting as well. This is just kind of like the preliminary report that we have today that we shared with you, but we haven't had our steering committee meeting after this came out.
And is the steering committee going to be pointed to, here's the disagreement and here are the areas of disagreement that exist, and you steering committee somehow
Oh, I plan to.
resolve? Okay.
I plan to, but in addition, I was proposing, in addition to, I think we should also do that.
Before, just so we don't get ahead of ourselves here, I know we anticipate a disagreement, but what we're talking about right now are discrepancies.
Right.
Okay, and discrepancies are different. Discrepancies are neutral.
Absolutely.
And what we're talking about is a question of reporting integrity, 5-4 sign off versus what showed up in the report.
Right.
Those are really the first things we need to understand, about. And, I think that'll start to point us to what goes next. We may know that there is a disagreement coming between those two job descriptions. But I think until we understand a little more about the integrity of how the stuff got represented or changed, we don't know what to do with that. So in addition to the stakeholder meeting here that you're putting together, I think there's also a check back with EHA.
Yeah.
Using this as an example, or if, the union has other examples that we need to ask about. And it could have been an editing error, or it could have been something else,
We don't,
but right, you check people's work, you're going to find discrepancies. You go back and ask why, and you go from there.
I think that's good advice. Thank you. Yeah.
So, okay. Any last comments on this before we move
so
on?
what's the next step for us, for the commission? Is this just going to be on the agenda of our next meeting and we see where we are again?
I think it's a great question, right?
I'd like to propose, well, I had frankly planned to have some report in for this topic every commission meeting we have moving forward, every regular meeting. And plan around it, so that I know that we're gonna have a committee meeting before our next meeting, so I do plan to report on it.
We can also keep this as a standing discussion item.
Yeah.
And, if we just decide there's nothing to discuss, it's a short item.
Yeah.
And-
And I think the moving slower concept, in other words, I'm not so sure that we have to slow down on phase 2. We're sort of in the middle of phase 2. We can be moving on 2 tracks, which is that, as I hear it, the union would like and should have an opportunity to confer with its members about what's just been presented, about what's in here, and being able to point out, okay, these job descriptions seem okay, but this one needs to be changed in these ways because it didn't capture what our employees are actually doing and stuff like that. And that strikes me as those things can happen at the same time.
Yeah.
So let's try, let's start that way.
Mhm.
And let's see, I think in the meantime, the union is going to go back and look at other things that, they're most concerned about. And, it's like every process like this has margin of error. And the question is, we knew right where to look, one of the most important things, and we found some errors.
Yeah.
We're going to look at other things we know that are important, and we're going to decide, are we comfortable with the margin of error? Do we understand adequately why it happened? Do we feel like there needs to be a doubling back on some things? I think we just don't know enough yet to know that.
Right.
But that at our, ongoing meetings, now we have something to work with. We know what some questions are.
One of the things, and I don't think we are in a position to micromanage this process because we just don't know about all these jobs and what everybody does. But in the narrative that our consultants gave us, it pretty much said, we think that the current job description pretty much captures the duties of the position, and the knowledge and abilities are appropriate, but we made some clarifying edits.
Yeah, we
When
need a
I
little more
looked at
detail
when
on
I
that.
looked at the job description, what are those clarifying edits?
Right.
And that can span a whole universe.
Right.
So do we need, and again, I hate to micromanage this stuff, but do we need a red line of, well, what actually did get changed? And maybe they were just little clarifying
I
edits.
would say to that, not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet. Let's give them an opportunity to represent on, the issue that was brought up to us here to understand. We'll hear that back. We'll decide what we think of that. Maybe the union will explore some other things and ask us to inquire about, other things that seem to be different from the sign off, to the representation in the report. We just don't know the magnitude of it yet. And we don't want perfect to be the enemy of good, right? So, we have some information to start with. And I think we leave it open, we'll discuss it at every meeting. Secretary will learn what he learns. Union will tell us what they learn, and
Yeah, and certainly the
help guide us.
union, even without a red line, they can be looking at a particular position. They can look at the existing, the current job description. They can look at the proposed job description, and even without a red line, you can see what the changes have been.
Yeah.
So, and either those changes are appropriate, they're good clarifications, or there's an issue. And if there's an issue, then I'm assuming that you'll let us know what those issues are. I mean, how else are we going to do this?
right,
Could I please just say one thing?
please.
So I think what we need to keep in mind that when the employees received the job description that they were asked to review, the final, we keep using the word final, but nothing is final. they were asked to review and, does this look accurate to you? So they signed off on something or they didn't. It was an employee input form that was provided for everyone to provide additional feedback. So it's still part of a process. So it's possible, I don't know what, I can't say that specifically was the IA SPED 2 was one of those jobs that had additional input that was incorporated into the job description after the fact, after that moment that it was approved, but nothing is approved necessarily at this moment. I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's still, everything's in process still. We're still taking these recommendations and we just need to keep that in mind, that nothing is final.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, I
Thank
think
you
that's
for that.
right.
It's a good reminder. Thank you.
All right, folks, let's move on. This was a good discussion. Public comment. Is there anybody who would like to make public comment? All right, I don't see anybody on the floor. I don't see anybody
Anybody in the room?
on the dais.
Nope.
Okay. Anybody in the Zoom room? No, it looks
No.
like even Jocelyn's given up. I don't see anybody except us at this point on the Zoom. Okay, we'll just say none. We'll move on. Next meeting. Are we taking July off?
We are.
Okay, unless some big thing comes up.
Well, if one of the commissioners tells me we have to meet, then, but part of our reasoning wasn't just to give staff time off, but it was also because the board's not meeting in July.
Huh.
So anything we're gonna try to affect, they're not, one or the other. checks and balances.
Well, we're certainly not going to get any business from the board, right?
Correct.
I think
Yeah,
that's
so-
right.
So how about what you pointed out, Chairperson, that we need to keep on the radar? We had a special meeting that had been, but because of events beyond our control, got canceled about the vacancies. Are we?
My guess is things that require other stakeholders. I mean, just because of the cadence of the school year, July is when staff take their vacations.
Mhm.
It's the only time that a lot of them have to take vacations. And I think they'd really hate us if we insisted they came to a meeting
Right. and
with
I'm
us in July.
proposing that.
And that's why I brought it up. I don't want to lose sight of it because the summer people disappear. But,
What I.
we
can
know we need
propose-
to do it, but I don't think it's going to be in July.
Oh, there's one person from the public, but before we get to them,
Oh,
just let me
okay.
get this thought out. So we can always do mid-July and do one special meeting for those items. Because where it's the vacancies and the recruitment, we can have a special meeting just for that.
Mhm.
I would be opposed to having a combined special meeting
Oh.
because I think each subject is really
Okay. Well, we
pretty
can-
complicated.
Rome was not built in a day. We're
No.
not going to solve it in
we
a
can
day.
But we can do at least one of those in early August. I know we have our regular meeting in late August.
Late August, right? I think.
Keep in mind, there's a lot of data crunching, especially for the vacancy that will have to occur, which is going to take time and effort.
Yeah.
So.
I think what I anticipate in July is if we heard back, if we got additional feedback that suggested, apropos to the class and comp study,
Yeah.
that, there was something we needed to talk through, I could see a special meeting.
Right.
Okay.
But
Right.
other than that, I think it makes sense to give everybody a break,
Yeah.
right? So I think what we're saying is for next meeting, barring some sort of need for a special meeting, we're taking July off. Our regular meeting is August. I didn't know I was running the meeting. I thought I'd have a chance.
August 30th.
August 30th. Thank you. Thank you. 4:30, right? Regular meeting. And right now, we don't have any special meetings scheduled for earlier in August, but maybe we'll correspond back and forth. And if we can squeeze in a special meeting. Yeah.
That could be good.
Okay.
I know we intend to meet with HR and Pauline's group on the vacancies
Mhm.
in July, so we may be able to do that
Okay.
in August.
All right. You'll keep us informed.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, let's declare victory. It's 4:18. We're adjourned.
I think there's someone.
there's one
someone on-
person.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, right. Why can't I see? You see them, but I can't. All right, I apologize to the member of the public. We just can't see that you're out there. Please go ahead.
Yes, this is Mark Ramia. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Berkeley High School, Mark Ramia. I was under the idea that that you guys were beginning at 4:30. That's what the website shows. Am I wrong?
I don't have the website in front of me. This meeting has been rescheduled and rescheduled and rescheduled. So it wouldn't
boy.
surprise me if something got messed up. But what does it show on the website?
On the website, it shows
It probably says
4:30 p.m.
But that's
Right.
a standard language that we didn't change for this particular meeting.
All right, so that was our bad.
Well, it said it on the agenda that went out that it was at 1.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
All right.
So anyway, can I go ahead then?
Yeah, sure, go ahead, please.
Okay, so one of my thoughts was I'm hoping that when they did the study for compensation, I'm not saying it right, but when they did the study, that there was a lot of independent work done, that they did independent study for what they were doing when they went reclassified, et cetera. And I like the fact that hearing that you're saying that somebody said that things aren't permanent, that this is still in process. One of the concerns I had was that I'm hoping from my experience in the past that we have to figure out what to do when it seems like, in my experience, the administration sometimes is not aware of job descriptions. That's going to be something that I'm going to have to deal with after this process is through. It seems like a lot of times the administration has not known or been aware of job descriptions, and that's been something that I've had to work out in the past. It seems like at times the administration has not been aware of the contract. And I hope that with this new process going through, that the administration will be aware of these things, what's on the contract and what's not. The job description and evaluations also have been important in making sure that, from what I've heard and what I've experienced, that a person isn't evaluated if the administration has never even seen them yet. So evaluation is important for with the administration knowing what your job description is and knowing the contract. And like I'm repeating myself, but I'm hoping that EHNA, am I saying that correctly? I hope, did an independent study, that they did a lot of independent study on their own. That's it. That's my share. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm just making a note. All right.
Can I make one quick comment?
sure.
Based on what Mr. Ramia just said? It's my understanding, and our executive director can correct me if I'm wrong, that when this process is over, that there will then be a substantial educational component that will take place. And that's educating the Board of Education in a more general, generic sort of way, and then educating specific supervisors and managers about including the job descriptions, including obtaining evaluations, that those are required, hiring, what the processes are for hiring, and that, again, to Mr. Ramia's point, that supervisors do need sort of a change in culture. Supervisors do need to be aware of the job description and then the rules that exist for evaluations and for hiring practices, so that we come into compliance. We're sort of trying to create a new era in a sense, and it's going to be a big lift, but that is our hope and expectation.
Thank you. That's a good summary. Appreciate that. Any other? Oh, you know what? We totally skipped closed session. And I think we're going to skip closed session. Thank you, though. Yeah. And it should be all the commissioners here. Okay, we actually should have brought that up when we talked about adoption of the agenda. But
I'm not heartbroken.
well, I know you're not heartbroken, and because closed session is closed to the public, I think we can do it. Okay, 4:23. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.